Think about the last time you truly lost something precious, a family heirloom, a piece of jewelry, maybe even something as simple as your keys. That sinking feeling of searching everywhere but coming up empty-handed. Now, imagine that on a scale beyond any one person, beyond any lifetime. Picture ancient empires burying their greatest fortunes in secret locations, hiding legendary artifacts to protect them from invaders or time itself, only for the knowledge of where they were hidden to vanish along with the civilizations that created them. These aren't just misplaced trinkets, these are treasures of almost unimaginable value and historical significance, lost to the world for centuries, waiting silently in the shadows of history. What if I told you that some of the most extraordinary riches from antiquity are still out there, untouched and undiscovered, hidden in forgotten tombs, sunken ships at the bottom of the ocean, or deep within impenetrable jungles? Treasures that would rewrite history books, treasures that empires were built upon, treasures that have fueled the dreams of explorers and adventurers for generations. We're talking about golden sarcophagi encrusted with jewels, chests overflowing with precious gems, artifacts of immense cultural and spiritual importance, hoards of coins from fallen kingdoms, each with a story more captivating than the last. Today, we're setting out together on an epic treasure hunt, one that spans the globe and cuts across millennia. We'll be counting down 30 of history's most sought-after hidden treasures, riches that have stubbornly refused to be found despite centuries of searching. From the fabled Ark of the Covenant to the lost gold of the pharaohs, from pirate loot buried on remote islands to imperial caches concealed during times of war, each of these mysteries holds a piece of our shared human story. So come with me, let's delve into the clues, the legends, and the tantalizing possibilities surrounding these legendary lost fortunes. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to finally solve a mystery that has eluded the world for ages. Beginning our countdown at number 30 is perhaps the most famous and powerful lost relic in all of human history, the Ark of the Covenant. Described in the Book of Exodus as a sacred chest constructed from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, it was far more than a mere container. It was believed to be the literal throne of God on earth, a vessel of unimaginable divine power. According to biblical accounts, it could part rivers, level walls, and strike down those who dared to look upon it improperly. It famously held the original stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments, a jar of manna, and Aaron's rod, making it the ultimate symbol of faith and covenant for the ancient Israelites. For centuries, the Ark was housed in the inner sanctum of the first temple in Jerusalem, the most holy of holy places. Then, in 587 BCE, the unthinkable happened. The Babylonian army under King Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to the city, ransacking and ultimately destroying the temple. The historical record from this point forward becomes a profound mystery. The Ark is never mentioned in the accounts of the Babylonian loot that was taken back to Mesopotamia. It simply vanishes from all recorded history. This abrupt disappearance has fueled 25 centuries of speculation, treasure hunting, and scholarly debate. One of the most prominent theories suggests the Ark was smuggled out of Jerusalem just before the siege. This theory points towards Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has long claimed to safeguard the Ark in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. They maintain it was brought there by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and has been protected by a single guardian monk for generations. While a compelling story, the artifact is never shown to outsiders, leaving the claim permanently in the realm of faith rather than verified fact. Other theories propose the Ark was never moved at all. Some archaeologists and rabbinical scholars believe it was hidden in a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers deep beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, a site now home to the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This location is one of the most politically and religiously sensitive places on the planet, making any extensive archaeological excavation utterly impossible. Another fascinating hypothesis suggests it was taken to Egypt, or perhaps even lies hidden in a cave near the Dead Sea, waiting to be discovered like the Dead Sea Scrolls. This leads to a critical question in our modern age of ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and advanced technology. Why has such a large golden object not been found? The answer lies in the nature of the search itself. We are not looking for a straightforward archaeological target. We are chasing a legend, an object whose very existence is intertwined with faith. The supposed divine properties attributed to it elevate the search from a simple treasure hunt to a quest for a spiritual holy grail. Furthermore, the most likely hiding places are in regions fraught with conflict or on sacred ground where digging is prohibited. The Ark remains the ultimate ghost, a treasure whose power lies as much in its enduring mystery as it ever did in its purported divine light. Moving from the sacred to the secular, but no less legendary, our next treasure is the final resting place of one of history's most formidable conquerors. At number 29, we search for the tomb of Genghis Khan. The man who forged the vast Mongol Empire through sheer military genius and unyielding will was laid to rest in 1227 CE, but the location of his grave is a secret that has been kept for almost 800 years. This isn't just a search for a burial chamber, it's a quest to find the epicenter of an empire that reshaped the entire world. The mystery begins with the circumstances of his burial itself. According to the accounts that have trickled down through history, Genghis Khan's funeral procession was an exercise in absolute secrecy. His most loyal soldiers transported his body back to his homeland in what is now Mongolia's Kentai province, a region he had loved in his youth. To ensure the site remained forever hidden, the soldiers carried out a grim but effective protocol. They killed every single person who witnessed the funeral procession. Then, to obliterate any trace of the gravesite, legend says they diverted a river to flow over the tomb, allowing the water to erase all evidence of their work. The earth itself was made to forget. This created a void in the historical record so complete that not a single primary source document exists that points to its location. This has not, of course, stopped the search. For decades, explorers and archaeologists have been drawn to the rugged wilderness of the Kentai Mountains, armed with increasingly sophisticated technology. Expeditions have employed satellite imagery to scan for subtle ground disturbances, used ground-penetrating radar to peek beneath the soil, and even conducted large-scale geological surveys. Yet all have returned empty-handed. The technological frustration is compounded by a powerful cultural barrier. For many Mongolian people, Genghis Khan is not merely a historical figure, he is a near-sacred national father. The idea of disturbing his eternal sleep with the shovels and brushes of archaeology is viewed by many as profoundly disrespectful, a desecration of a site that was meant to remain inviolate. This deep cultural reverence has led to official restrictions and a great deal of local reluctance to assist foreign expeditions, creating a protective veil around the secret. So we are left with a captivating paradox. The tomb of one of the most famous men in world history, who commanded an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, is likely hidden in a relatively small area. Yet it remains as isolated and secure as if it were on another planet. It's a powerful reminder that some secrets are guarded not just by earth and stone, but by time, tradition, and the unwavering will of a people to honor the final wish of their greatest leader. Occupying our next position is a treasure of an entirely different kind, one whose value is measured not in gold or gems, but in the immeasurable currency of human knowledge. We come now to the story of the Library of Alexandria, and the incalculable loss of its contents represents one of the most devastating catastrophes in the intellectual history of our species. Founded in the 3rd century BCE in the city of Alexandria, Egypt, this wasn't merely a library. It was the ancient world's equivalent of the entire internet, a single repository designed to collect all of the knowledge ever written. The scale of its collection was staggering. Historians estimate it may have housed over 500,000 scrolls, a number unrivaled anywhere else on Earth. Under the decree of the Ptolemaic pharaohs, every ship that docked in Alexandria's bustling harbor was searched. Any scrolls found on board were confiscated, taken to the library, and copied by a small army of scribes. The copies were then given back to the owners, while the priceless originals were added to the library's ever-growing collection. This aggressive acquisition policy ensured that the library held works you simply could not find anywhere else. Original plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the complete historical writings of Aristotle, detailed accounts of lost civilizations, and groundbreaking texts on astronomy, geometry, and medicine that were centuries ahead of their time. The tragedy, of course, is that this magnificent archive was destroyed, but pinning the blame on a single event is where the historical waters become incredibly murky. The destruction happened not in one cataclysmic fire, but in a series of devastating blows spread across centuries. The first major incident occurred in 48 BCE during Julius Caesar's civil war in Alexandria. Besieged in the harbor, Caesar ordered his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet. Several ancient historians, including Plutarch, report that this fire spread from the docks and accidentally burned down a portion of the city that housed a warehouse of scrolls destined for the library. While this likely wasn't the main library building itself, it was still a significant loss. The next major blow came centuries later, in the late 4th century CE, as the Roman Empire was Christianizing. Theophilus, the Patriarch of Alexandria, ordered the destruction of the city's pagan temples, which included the Serapeum, a magnificent temple that may have acted as a daughter library housing a secondary collection. Christian mobs are recorded to have ransacked and demolished the site. The final traditional nail in the coffin is attributed to the Muslim conquest of Alexandria in the 7th century. A later legend claims the Caliph Omar ordered all scrolls that contradicted the Quran to be burned, reportedly saying the texts were either superfluous if they agreed with the holy book, or heretical if they did not, and were thus used as fuel for the city's bathhouses for months. However, many modern scholars heavily dispute the veracity of this account, noting it was written centuries after the fact. This leads us to the tantalizing possibility that fuels modern searches. Could any of this knowledge have survived? Some archaeologists and historians speculate that the main library's core collection might not have been in the grand buildings above ground that were so vulnerable to fire and riot. They propose that a vast network of underground storage chambers, or hypogee, could have been constructed to protect the most precious scrolls in a stable, climate-controlled environment. Imagine a labyrinth of sealed, forgotten tunnels deep beneath the modern streets of Alexandria, their entrances lost to centuries of rubble and rebuilding. This theory offers a sliver of hope, a reason to keep searching. Modern excavations in Alexandria are exceedingly difficult. The ancient city lies buried directly beneath the thriving modern metropolis. But the dream persists that somewhere, hidden in a waterproof, airtight chamber, a cache of papyrus scrolls could have survived, waiting to be found. The recovery of even a single room from the Library of Alexandria would be an archaeological discovery that would dwarf the value of any golden treasure. It would be a window into a lost world of thought, giving voice back to geniuses silenced for millennia and potentially rewriting entire chapters of our ancient past. Leaving behind the lost wisdom of Alexandria, we arrive at a treasure that is both dazzlingly opulent and almost entirely singular in its construction. At number 28, we enter the gilded mystery of the Amber Room. Often called the eighth wonder of the world, this was not merely a room with some amber decoration. It was an entire chamber, a breathtaking marvel where the walls themselves were masterfully paneled with over 6 tons of the finest carved amber, backed with gold leaf and punctuated by intricate mosaics and glittering mirrors. When lit by candlelight, the entire room would have glowed with a warm, honeyed, almost magical radiance, a sight that left visitors utterly speechless. Its story begins as a symbol of diplomacy. The room was originally crafted in Prussia in the early 18th century, a monumental Baroque project. In 1716, King Frederick William I of Prussia gifted it to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia to cement an alliance against Sweden. The crates of meticulously numbered panels were shipped to St. Petersburg, where it was first installed in the Winter Palace. Decades later, Empress Elizabeth had it moved to the Catherine Palace in Tsarskoye Selo, where master craftsmen expanded it, adding even more amber and Florentine mosaics until it covered an astounding 180 square feet and was valued in modern terms at an almost incomprehensible $500 million. For 2 centuries, it stood as a crowning jewel of Russian imperial splendor. Then came the tide of World War II. As Nazi forces advanced on Leningrad, the curators at the Catherine Palace faced an agonizing dilemma. They attempted to dismantle and hide the room, but they discovered to their horror that the dry amber had become incredibly fragile with age. Attempting to remove it caused it to crumble. Desperate, they made a fateful decision. They tried to hide the room in place by covering it with mundane wallpaper. The ruse was pitifully ineffective. German soldiers of Army Group North, specifically trained in looting cultural treasures, recognized the priceless artifact immediately. They dismantled the entire room in a mere 36 hours, packed the panels into 27 crates, and shipped them to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, present-day Kaliningrad, where the room was put on display as a trophy of war. This is where the concrete facts dissolve into a fog of war and conflicting testimony. In 1944, as the Allies bombed Königsberg and the Soviet Red Army closed in, the room had to be moved again. It was crated up, and then it simply vanished from all reliable records. The most persistent theory suggests the crates were never moved at all, that they were stored in the cavernous cellars of Königsberg Castle and were destroyed when the castle was extensively damaged by British aerial bombardment and subsequent fires. However, searchers of the ruins have never turned up any conclusive evidence of the amber, which would have melted in an intense fire, leaving only a telltale residue that has never been found. This absence fuels the more thrilling theories. Many believe the crates were successfully evacuated and hidden in a secret salt mine or a forgotten bunker somewhere in Germany, perhaps in the Ore Mountains, waiting for a Nazi victory that never came. Treasure hunters have combed these regions for decades, following cryptic clues and old soldiers' diaries, but to no avail. Another compelling theory posits that the panels were loaded onto a ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was torpedoed and sunk by a Soviet submarine in the Baltic Sea in 1945 with massive loss of life. The wreck, now a war grave, is notoriously difficult to explore, and the idea of the amber room resting at the bottom of the sea adds a layer of tragic poetry to its story. There are even wilder claims that it was secretly smuggled to South America, or that it was found by the Soviets and whisked away to a secret Chinese letter, though no evidence supports these. The enduring fascination with the amber room is so powerful that a dedicated team of Russian craftsmen spent 24 years, from 1979 to 2003, painstakingly reconstructing it from old photographs and descriptions, using the same techniques and even locating the original Italian mosaic masters. The replica now sits in the Catherine Palace, a stunning tribute to the original. Yet, the fate of those 27 crates remains one of World War II's greatest unsolved mysteries. It represents not just the loss of immense wealth, but the brutal looting of a nation's cultural soul, a stolen masterpiece whose silence today speaks volumes about the chaos and greed of war. From the tragic fate of a gilded Russian chamber, we journey back to the heart of the Middle Ages and a secret so potent it sparked the sudden downfall of the wealthiest and most powerful organization in Christendom. Claiming our 5th spot is the legendary lost treasure of the Knights Templar. This was not a single chest of gold, but an accumulation of unimaginable wealth, a vast network of financial power, and relics of immense spiritual significance, all of which seemingly evaporated into thin air following one of history's most shocking and coordinated arrests. To understand the treasure, you must first understand the order itself. Founded in 1118 to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon quickly evolved into something far greater. They became Europe's first multinational banking corporation. Pilgrims could deposit funds at a Templar preceptory in London and withdraw them in Jerusalem using a system of encrypted letters of credit, a revolutionary concept for the time. They managed the finances of kings, popes, and nobles, amassing enormous land holdings, castles, and a legendary hoard of gold, silver, and precious artifacts donated by the faithful. Rumors swirled that their treasure vaults also contained their most sacred finds from beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, including fragments of the true cross, the Holy Grail itself, and even the lost treasures of the Jewish temple. This immense power and secrecy bred resentment and envy, particularly in King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. Deeply in debt to the Templars and covetous of their wealth, he devised a ruthless plan. On Friday, October 13, 1307, he issued sealed orders to his officials across France to be opened simultaneously at dawn. In a single, devastating blow, thousands of Templars, including the Order's Grand Master Jacques de Molay, were arrested on charges of heresy, blasphemy, and idolatry. The date was so infamous it is the root of our superstition around Friday the 13th. The subsequent trials were a sham, a brutal exercise in extracting confessions through torture. But during the seizures, a baffling mystery emerged. The king's men stormed the Templar headquarters at the Paris Temple, expecting to find vaults overflowing with treasure. Instead, they found them largely empty. The bulk of the Order's legendary wealth had vanished. This is where the story takes its most intriguing turn. According to chronicles from the time, just before the mass arrest, a convoy of Templar wagons was seen leaving the Paris Temple under cover of night. More significantly, the Order's entire Atlantic fleet, which was stationed at their key port of La Rochelle, simply disappeared from all historical records. Dozens of ships capable of carrying an immense cargo sailed into the fog of history and were never seen again. This maritime disappearance is the launchpad for centuries of treasure hunting. Where did that fleet go? One compelling theory points to Scotland. The Templars had close ties to Scotland's Robert the Bruce, who was excommunicated by the same pope who disbanded the Templars. It's speculated the fleet carried its sacred cargo north, finding sanctuary there. Some believe the treasure was hidden beneath Rosslyn Chapel, its ornate carvings supposedly filled with Templar symbolism, waiting for the day it would be safe to reveal itself. Other theories suggest the fleet sailed west, following navigational knowledge that was centuries ahead of its time. Did the Templars, with their extensive travels, have maps that hinted at a new world? Could they have established a remote outpost in what is now Nova Scotia in Canada, or even further south, burying their treasure in a new land far from the reach of the French king and the Pope? The mysterious 19th century discovery of a supposed Templar altar and Crusader swords in Nova Scotia lends a tantalizing, if unproven, credibility to this idea. A third possibility is that the treasure found a safer, more diplomatic home. Portugal's King Denis refused to persecute the Templars, instead simply rebranding them as the Order of Christ, which later sponsored the voyages of explorers like Vasco da Gama. It is entirely plausible that the Templar wealth was quietly integrated into the Portuguese crown, funding the age of discovery that would reshape the world map. The true nature of the treasure is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. Was it purely a financial reserve of gold and silver that funded secret operations for generations? Or was it something far more profound, the ultimate religious relics, artifacts so powerful that their discovery would challenge the foundations of faith itself. The lost fleet of La Rochelle remains the great blank page in this story, a silent armada carrying the greatest secret of the medieval world to a destination we are still trying to divine. Shifting from the shadowy fate of the Templar fleet, we venture into the sun-scorched sands of Egypt for a search rooted not in medieval myth, but in the vivid historical accounts of one of antiquity's most dramatic love stories. At number 26, we seek the lost tomb of Cleopatra VII and her Roman general, Mark Antony. This isn't just a quest for a royal burial chamber, it's a hunt for the final, poignant stage of a saga that sealed the fate of an entire empire. Ancient historians like Plutarch provide us with a remarkably detailed description of this tomb. He writes that Cleopatra, foreseeing her defeat by Octavian, constructed a lavish mausoleum for herself and Antony within the palace complex of Alexandria. It was a grand, towering building made of stone, filled with treasures of immense value: gold, silver, ebony, ivory, and precious jewels. More importantly, it held the sacred relics of their combined rule. But its most famous feature was its security. It was designed to be sealed by massive, heavy doors, a fortress of solitude for the doomed couple. It was inside this very mausoleum that a dying Antony was brought to his lover, and where Cleopatra later took her own life, choosing to join him in death rather than be paraded through Rome as a captive trophy. After their suicides in 30 BCE, Octavian is said to have allowed them to be buried together inside the tomb with full royal honors. And then, like so many other wonders of ancient Alexandria, the location was lost to history, likely destroyed by earthquakes and tsunamis that submerged much of the ancient coastline. For centuries, the search focused on the sprawling modern metropolis of Alexandria itself. The problem is that the ancient royal quarter now lies mostly underwater, submerged in the murky, polluted waters of the city's eastern harbor. Underwater archaeologists like Frank Gaudio have made stunning discoveries there, mapping the ruins of palaces, temples, and statues that toppled into the sea centuries ago. It is entirely plausible that the foundations of Cleopatra's mausoleum are down there, buried under centuries of silt, shielded from discovery by the challenging conditions of zero visibility and modern port traffic. However, a compelling and alternative theory has captured the world's imagination in recent years, spearheaded by the charismatic and determined Dominican archaeologist Dr. Kathleen Martinez. Her hypothesis is a brilliant piece of reverse engineering. She reasoned that Cleopatra, the master politician, would have been intensely aware of her own legacy and her desire to be reunited in the afterlife with Antony, who was not considered a pharaoh by the traditional Egyptian priesthood. Therefore, she wouldn't have built her tomb in the politically volatile royal quarter. Instead, Dr. Martinez believes Cleopatra would have chosen a site of immense religious significance, a temple dedicated to Osiris, the god of the underworld who himself was resurrected, drawing a parallel to her hoped for eternal reunion with Antony. This line of thinking led her to Taposiris Magna, a temple complex located about 30 miles west of Alexandria. For over 15 years, Dr. Martinez and her team have been excavating the site, and their findings are nothing short of electrifying. They have uncovered a vast necropolis containing many high-status Greco-Roman mummies, some buried with gold leaf tongues to allow them to speak before the tribunal of Osiris. They found alabaster heads believed to depict Cleopatra and Mark Antony, countless coins bearing her image, and a massive 2,000-ton tunnel carved through solid rock beneath the temple, a staggering engineering feat indicative of a hugely important, secretive burial project. Most recently, they discovered a magnificent, untouched tomb deep within the rock containing 2 gilded mummies, a tantalizing hint that they are getting closer to the main event. The potential discoveries inside the tomb are what fuel this relentless search. Finding the remains of Cleopatra and Antony would be a biological and historical sensation, allowing for facial reconstruction and perhaps even solving the ancient mystery of how she truly died. But the artifacts surrounding them would be priceless. We could expect their golden sarcophagi, their royal regalia, the iconic serpent armband, the double crown of Egypt, Antony's Roman armor, and the vast wealth described by Plutarch. More than gold, the tomb could contain the most complete library of scrolls from the era, personal writings that would give Cleopatra her own voice for the first time, shattering the Roman propaganda that has defined her for 2 millennia. The search for their tomb is a race against time and rising seawater, a modern scientific investigation guided by ancient clues, whether it lies beneath the Mediterranean waves or deep under the sands of Taposiris Magna. Its discovery would provide the ultimate conclusion to one of history's greatest tragedies, finally allowing the world's most famous couple to rest in peace, not in mystery. Transitioning from the sun-baked tombs of Egypt to the mist-shrouded rivers of ancient Germania, we encounter a treasure whose power lies not just in gold, but in the very stories we tell about it. At number 7, we delve into the legend of the Nibelungenlied, the epic poem that gave us one of mythology's most infamous cursed hoards, the treasure of the Nibelungs. This is a saga where history and myth are so deeply intertwined that separating them becomes a quest in itself, a search for a king's ransom that may have inspired a curse that shook the foundations of the ancient world. The legendary version of this story, immortalized in the 13th century epic poem and later in Wagner's monumental Ring cycle operas, tells of a hoard of Rhine gold. This treasure was originally stolen from the Rhine maidens, magical nymphs who guarded it in the river's depths. The gold was then forged into a ring of ultimate power by the dwarf Alberich, who placed a terrible curse upon it. Death and misery would follow any who possessed it. This ring and its accompanying hoard then passed through hands both divine and mortal, fueling a cycle of greed, betrayal, and annihilation that ultimately destroys the heroic Siegfried and the entire Burgundian royal court. The legend concludes with the treasure being loaded onto wagons and sunk back into the depths of the Rhine, returned to its origin to await the next foolhardy enough to seek it. But could this epic poem be a dramatic retelling of a real historical catastrophe? Many scholars believe the answer is yes. The Burgundians were a very real Germanic tribe who established a kingdom on the Rhine with its capital at Worms. In the year 437 CE, their kingdom was utterly obliterated by a combined force of Huns and Romans. The historical record is sparse, but it paints a picture of a sudden, violent end. The Burgundian king, Gunther, and a vast number of his people were wiped out. It requires little imagination to see how this traumatic event could have evolved over centuries of storytelling into the epic tale of the Nibelungenlied, with the historical king Gunther becoming the legendary one, and the real-life Huns becoming the monstrous, vengeful figures of myth. This is where the treasure hunt begins in earnest. If a powerful kingdom was sacked and its royal line extinguished, what happened to its wealth? The Burgundian kings would have possessed a significant royal treasury, tribute, war loot, and gifts used to reward their loyal warriors. The most compelling theory is that this real treasure, the historical kernel of the Nibelungen hoard, was either looted by the Huns and subsequently lost, or, more tantalizingly, hidden or sunk into the Rhine by the Burgundians themselves in a last, desperate act to keep it from their enemies. This would directly mirror the legendary ending, creating a perfect loop between fact and fiction. This possibility has driven numerous searches, particularly in the 19th and 20th centuries, with amateur and professional treasure hunters alike scouring the riverbed near Worms and other ancient Burgundian sites. They have employed dredges, dived into the murky waters, and used metal detectors along the banks, all hoping for a glimmer of that cursed gold. While countless Roman coins and other artifacts have been pulled from the Rhine over the years, nothing that can be definitively linked to a singular, massive Burgundian royal hoard has ever been found. The reasons for this failure are as murky as the river itself. The Rhine is a powerful, fast-moving waterway that has changed its course and silted over dramatically in the past 16 centuries. Any treasure sunk in its depths could now be buried under dozens of feet of mud, far beyond the reach of conventional metal detectors. Furthermore, the precise location of the 437 CE battle is unknown, meaning the search area is impossibly vast. The greatest obstacle, however, may be the curse itself, not a supernatural one, but the curse of the story. The legend is so powerful that it has likely romanticized the scale of the actual historical treasure. The royal coffers of a minor Germanic kingdom, while significant, would have paled in comparison to the mountains of gold and the magical ring described in the epic. We may be searching for a historical reality that simply cannot live up to its mythological shadow, and yet the dream persists. The idea that the Rhine guards a secret from the very dawn of the Germanic nations is an irresistible lure. It represents a tangible link to a shadowy period when empires clashed, tribes rose and fell, and history was forged in fire and song. Discovering even a single ornate brooch or a handful of coins that could be conclusively tied to the Burgundian court of King Gunther would be a monumental find. It would provide archaeological proof for a foundational myth, grounding a story of gods, dragons, and magic in the cold, hard reality of gold lost in a river's embrace. Until then, the treasure remains where it has always been, halfway between history and legend, at the bottom of the Rhine and at the heart of our imagination. Descending from the misty realms of Germanic legend, we arrive at a treasure whose story is not myth, but a well-documented historical event of staggering betrayal and greed. At number 8, we pursue the lost Inca gold, a king's ransom paid in vain, a hoard so vast it was measured by the roomful, and whose disappearance into the Andes represents one of the most tantalizing and frustrating treasure hunts in the Americas. The story begins with one of history's most fateful encounters. In 1532, the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro and his small band of soldiers captured the Inca Emperor Atahualpa in the city of Cajamarca. Recognizing the Spaniards' insatiable desire for the shiny yellow metal, Atahualpa made a desperate offer to buy his freedom. He pointed to one wall of the large room he was held in and promised to fill it, not just to the top but as high as he could reach, with gold objects. He then offered to fill an adjacent, smaller room twice over with silver. To a man who came from a world where gold was valued for its spiritual and aesthetic beauty rather than as currency, this must have seemed a reasonable, even extravagant bargain. To Pizarro, it was an unimaginable fortune. For months, a steady stream of porters arrived in Cajamarca from across the empire, bearing exquisite artifacts to melt down into ingots. They brought life-sized gold statues of corn plants with silver ears, intricate golden llamas, dazzling ceremonial knives, magnificent ceremonial vessels, and stunning ornamental plates. The room was filled to the designated line, a ransom worth, in modern estimation, well over $50 million. The Spanish, true to their ruthless reputation, accepted the payment and then broke their word, strangling Atahualpa after a mock trial. It was at this moment of ultimate betrayal that the story of the lost treasure truly begins. As news of the emperor's murder spread, Inca generals and priests loyal to Atahualpa gave the order to divert the remaining caravans that were still en route to Cajamarca. This second, and perhaps even larger, shipment of gold was immediately redirected into the vast, uncharted wilderness of the Andes, hidden away to prevent it from falling into the hands of the treacherous invaders. This is where the legend solidifies around a specific and notoriously dangerous location: the Danganats mountain range in present-day Ecuador. This is not a range of rolling hills. It is a brutal, apocalyptic landscape of jagged peaks, deep ravines, and dense, cloud-shrouded paramo grasslands. The weather is notoriously vicious, with fog that can descend in an instant and torrential rains that trigger landslides, earning it the local nickname, the Mountains of the Tears. According to persistent legend, the general in charge of hiding the treasure, Rumenyahui, used his knowledge of the terrain to conceal the hoard in a secret cave or lake within these mountains, executing the porters who carried it to ensure its secret died with them. The primary catalyst for modern treasure hunters is the account of a Spanish soldier named Valverde, who supposedly married a local woman and was led by her family to the treasure decades later. His detailed, if cryptic, derrotero or guide describes a path past specific lakes and landmarks to the hidden cache. This document has been the holy grail for countless expeditions, from the English botanist Richard Spruce in the 19th century to the American engineer Barth Blake in the early 20th, who allegedly wrote in letters that he had found the treasure and could see golden vessels and golden suns before he mysteriously vanished from a ship heading back to the United States. So why, with a detailed guide and modern technology, has this massive hoard never been recovered? The challenges are almost supernaturally formidable. First, the Valverde derrotero is maddeningly vague by modern standards. Directions like "follow the sound of the waterfall" or "look for the hill shaped like a sleeping woman" are nearly impossible to pinpoint in a mountain range covering over 200,000 hectares of pristine wilderness. Second, the terrain itself is a death trap. The combination of altitude sickness, unpredictable weather, deep bogs that can swallow a person whole, and sheer cliff faces has defeated even the most experienced explorers and has claimed numerous lives over the centuries. Modern technology like ground-penetrating radar is often useless here, thwarted by the dense vegetation and complex geology. Perhaps the greatest obstacle is the sheer scale of the search. We are not looking for a single chest. The lost Inca gold is thought to be a dispersed hoard, with artifacts hidden in multiple locations across a vast area, not a single pile. A treasure hunter could walk within 10 feet of a crevice holding a golden statue and never know it. The treasure remains protected not by a curse, but by the impassable, majestic, and ruthless geography of the Andes themselves, a monument to a civilization that managed to safeguard its greatest wealth from destruction, leaving it as a silent testament to a broken promise and a lost empire. Leaving behind the cursed gold of ancient epics and the lost riches of the Andes, we arrive at a heist so audacious and politically explosive that it remains the greatest unsolved crime in Irish history. At number 9, we investigate the baffling disappearance of the Irish crown jewels, a theft that unfolded not in some dark age, but in the modern, well-guarded heart of Dublin Castle in 1907. To understand why this theft was so devastating, you must first understand what these jewels represented. They were not ancient artifacts dug from a bog, but a spectacular set of regalia commissioned in the 17th century for the newly created Order of St. Patrick, an order of chivalry intended to bind the Anglo-Irish aristocracy to the British crown. The centerpieces were a magnificent diamond star and a 5-pointed diamond badge, often worn on a lavish golden collar. But their value was far more than the sum of their gemstones, which included Brazilian diamonds, emeralds, and rubies from the Russian Tsarina. They were the ultimate symbols of British imperial authority in Ireland, worn by the Lord Lieutenant, the King's representative, at state events. Their theft wasn't just a robbery, it was a profound and humiliating slap in the face to the entire British establishment. The sheer brazenness of the crime is what still captures the imagination. The jewels were kept in a library strongroom inside the heavily patrolled Bedford Tower of Dublin Castle, a building that also housed the office of the Ulster King of Arms, the heraldic authority for Ireland. The safe required 2 keys to open, held by 2 different officials. Yet, on the morning of July 6, 1907, just days before a much-anticipated visit by King Edward VII, officials discovered the safe unlocked and the jewels gone. The only sign of entry was that a key had been left in the lock of the library door from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. It was, by all accounts, the perfect inside job. The subsequent investigation was a masterclass in incompetence and cover-up, which only fueled conspiracy theories that persist to this day. The man in charge of the investigation was the Dublin Metropolitan Police Commissioner, himself a close friend of the officials under suspicion. The primary suspects were a bizarre and colorful cast of characters directly connected to the castle. There was Sir Arthur Vickers, the Ulster King of Arms, a known heavy drinker who was notoriously careless with his keys, often leaving them in his desk drawer or even lending them out. His staff included Francis Shackleton, brother of the famous Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton, a man with rumored ties to homosexual circles and who was deep in debt. There was also a disgraced army officer, Captain Richard Gorges, who had been dismissed from the service and was known to have a violent temper. Theories about the theft are as numerous as they are sensational. The most persistent one suggests it was an inside job orchestrated to embarrass the British government and King Edward, who was reportedly furious. Some believed Irish nationalists were behind it, aiming to sabotage the royal visit and mock British power. Others pointed the finger at Shackleton, suggesting he stole the jewels to pay off his creditors, perhaps with the help of Gorges. A more salacious theory, whispered for years, involved a homosexual ring operating within the castle. It was alleged that Vickers and others were being blackmailed, and that the jewels were stolen to obtain incriminating letters that were also kept in the same safe, making the theft about secrets, not gems. But what happened to the jewels after they left the castle? This is where the trail goes completely cold. Their distinctive gemstones, particularly the large Brazilian diamonds, were so unique that they could never be sold on the open market. The most logical theory is that they were immediately taken to Amsterdam, the world's diamond-cutting capital at the time, where the stones were pried from their settings and recut to be unrecognizable, then sold off individually. This would have destroyed their historic value but netted the thieves a small fortune. Other theories suggest they were hidden away and never sold, perhaps buried in the Irish countryside or even smuggled to London. Some romantics hold out hope that they remain concealed within the walls of Dublin Castle itself, waiting for a renovator's hammer to reveal them. The aftermath of the theft ruined lives. Sir Arthur Vickers was fired in disgrace, his reputation destroyed. He always maintained his innocence, even writing a manuscript naming his primary suspects, a document that was mysteriously suppressed by the government. He was eventually murdered by the Irish Republican Army during the Irish War of Independence in 1921, taking his secrets to the grave. The case was officially closed in the 1980s, but the file remains tantalizingly incomplete, with key pages missing. The theft of the Irish crown jewels was more than a simple crime. It was a scandal that exposed the carelessness, corruption, and complex social intrigues at the highest levels of British administration in Ireland. It left behind a legacy of ruined reputations, a tantalizing mystery, and the ghost of a treasure that, should it ever be found, would be priceless not for its gems, but for the shocking truths it might finally reveal. Distinct from every other parchment found in the caves of Qumran, one scroll stands apart not for its spiritual wisdom, but for its material promise. While the other Dead Sea Scrolls contain biblical texts and community rules, this document, known as the Copper Scroll, is essentially an ancient treasure map. Dating to the 1st century CE, it is a cryptic inventory of staggering wealth, meticulously listing 64 hiding places for quantities of gold, silver, precious artifacts, and even a second duplicate scroll that provides more details. We are not talking about small caches. The scroll itemizes over 4,600 talents of gold and silver, a sum that in today's value would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, all secreted away in the arid landscape of Judea. The physical object itself is a marvel and a riddle. Unlike its companions written on fragile papyrus or leather, this scroll was inscribed onto thin sheets of copper alloy, a deliberately durable medium meant to last. The choice of such a permanent material suggests the immense importance of its message. However, this durability came at a cost. The metal was so oxidized and brittle after 2 millennia that scholars couldn't unroll it without destroying it. For years, its secrets were locked away, physically inaccessible. The breakthrough came in 1955 when scientists at the University of Manchester carefully sawed the scroll into 23 curved segments, finally revealing the text inside. Yet, reading the words was only the beginning of the challenge. The text, written in a form of Hebrew different from the other scrolls, is frustratingly matter-of-fact and utterly cryptic. It reads less like a story and more like a straightforward, if bewildering, set of instructions. A typical entry might say something like, "In the ruin that is in the valley, pass under the staircase to the north. 40 talents of silver are buried there." The problem is that the landmarks it references a specific ruin, a particular valley, a named staircase, were likely common knowledge 2,000 years ago, but their meanings have been completely lost to time. The directions are a geographic puzzle where all the original points of reference have vanished, eroded by centuries of war, rebuilding, and natural decay. Is the valley refer to the Kidron Valley near Jerusalem? Is the ruin a specific building long since crumbled to dust? Without this key, the scroll is a lockbox with no combination. Most scholars believe the treasure it describes is real and connects directly to the catastrophic First Jewish-Roman War. As the Roman legions under Titus advanced on Jerusalem in 70 CE, systematically crushing the revolt, the Jewish defenders and priests would have faced a desperate dilemma. The temple, the heart of their faith, was overflowing with centuries of donations, sacred vessels, and the vast wealth of the treasury. Allowing that unimaginable hoard to fall into the hands of the pillaging Romans was unthinkable. The logical solution was a coordinated, frantic effort to hide the most valuable items, creating this inventory on indestructible copper to ensure the knowledge survived even if the people did not. The Copper Scroll, then, is not a myth but a heartbreaking historical document, a last will and testament for a nation's sacred wealth written in its final hours. This tangible possibility has ignited numerous expeditions. Treasure hunters and archaeologists have spent decades trying to match the scroll's clues to the actual topography around Qumran and Jerusalem. They have dug near aqueducts, investigated ancient cisterns, and scanned caves with metal detectors, following interpretations of the vague directions. One of the most prominent searches was led by a retired American professor and a Belgian car mechanic in the 1960s who believed they had cracked the code. Their dig, which required huge financial backing, ultimately found nothing but a single ancient Roman nail, a cruel metaphor for the fruitlessness of the search. More recent efforts have used advanced technology like ground-penetrating radar, but the same fundamental problem remains: the directions are just too obscure. So why, with a literal list of locations, has no one found even a single talent of this silver? Beyond the decoding issue, there are several compelling theories. One suggests the treasures were discovered long ago, not by modern explorers but by the Romans themselves. It is entirely plausible that after sacking Jerusalem, the Romans captured temple officials or discovered the hiding places through interrogation, systematically recovering the loot and melting it down for their own coffers, leaving the Copper Scroll as a ghost of a fortune that was already spent. Another, more intriguing possibility is that the treasure was never meant to be found by just anyone. The scroll's unusual language and its divergence from the other, more religious Dead Sea Scrolls have led some to speculate it belonged to a separate, perhaps more militant sect. The instructions might not be literal geographic directions but coded messages, understandable only to a select few initiates, a code that died with the last keeper of the secret. The Copper Scroll, therefore, occupies a unique space in the world of lost treasures. It is the most factual, deliberately created treasure map from antiquity, yet it is also the most elusive. It dangles the promise of unimaginable wealth and the recovery of the very heart of Jewish temple worship before our eyes, only to snatch it away with cryptic clues and lost landmarks. It represents a desperate act of preservation by a people on the brink of annihilation, a silent scream against oblivion that we can see but cannot fully hear. Its enduring power lies in this paradox. It is both the most provable and the most unattainable treasure on our list, a rusted key to a golden vault whose door we cannot find. Shifting our focus from the deserts of the Middle East to the burgeoning wealth of the New World, we encounter a tale of colonial opulence, pirate greed, and a vanishing act so complete it has taunted fortune seekers for 200 years. Landing at number 11 on our countdown is the legendary lost treasure of the Lim, a cathedral, a hoard whose value isn't just in its staggering material worth, but in the sheer audacity of its disappearance and the romantic, almost mythical island where it is said to rest. The story begins not with pirates but with panic in the streets of Lima, Peru. It was 1820, and the fires of revolution, sparked by figures like Simón Bolívar, were sweeping across South America. The Spanish royalists who had ruled for centuries saw their grip on power slipping away. In Lima, the seat of Spanish colonial power, the Catholic Church had amassed an almost unimaginable collection of wealth over 300 years. This wasn't just tax revenue, it was a mountain of devotion. The cathedral's vaults held an accumulation of priceless artifacts donated by the faithful. Gem-encrusted chalices and monstrances, solid gold candle holders, jeweled robes for statues of saints, and most famously, a life-sized, solid gold statue of the Virgin Mary, adorned with a crown of emeralds and holding the infant Jesus, himself crafted from gold. Facing the advancing revolutionary armies, the Spanish viceroy made a desperate decision. He could not allow this sacred and royal wealth to fall into the hands of the rebels. He ordered it all packed into wooden chests and loaded onto a single ship for transport to the safety of Mexico. This is where the plot thickens and a British sea captain named William Thompson enters the narrative. His ship, the Mary Dear, was contracted for the voyage, a seemingly straightforward merchant run. To ensure the treasure's security, the viceroy placed a contingent of Spanish soldiers and a cohort of priests on board to guard the cargo. The sheer magnitude of the treasure, however, proved too powerful a temptation. According to the most popular version of the tale, once the ship was out to sea, Captain Thompson and his crew mutinied. They overcame and murdered the Spanish guards and priests, throwing their bodies overboard. Now in possession of a fortune that could make them kings, they faced a new problem. They were now the most wanted men on the high seas, hunted by both the crumbling Spanish navy and the new revolutionary governments. Their only option was to hide the loot. They set a course for Cocos Island, a remote, uninhabited speck of land about 340 miles off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. This was a well-known haven for pirates and whalers, a place with plentiful fresh water and deep, hidden bays where a ship could lie at anchor unseen. For days, Thompson and his men are said to have labored, hauling the heavy chests and even the golden statue inland. They navigated the island's rugged, volcanic terrain, a landscape of steep cliffs, dense rainforests, and cascading waterfalls, and found the perfect hiding spot, a cave or a location near a specific waterfall. They buried their bloody fortune, creating a detailed map to ensure they could return for it once the heat died down. But fate, as it often does in these stories, had other plans. The Mary Dear was eventually captured by a Spanish warship. Most of the crew were hanged for piracy on the spot. Only Captain Thompson and his first mate were spared, supposedly on the condition that they lead the Spanish back to the treasure. The story goes that they were taken to Cocos Island, but once ashore, the two men seized their chance and escaped into the impenetrable jungle, never to be seen again. Thompson allegedly died years later, but not before whispering the secret and passing his map to a fellow sailor, thus igniting a treasure hunt that continues to this day. This legend has made Cocos Island the most hunted treasure location in the world. Over the past 2 centuries, more than 500 expeditions have descended upon its shores, funded by tycoons, led by famous explorers, and equipped with every technological advance imaginable. Presidents Franklin Roosevelt and actor Errol Flynn both financed searches. Modern teams have arrived with sophisticated ground-penetrating radar, metal detectors capable of finding gold at great depths, and even drones for aerial surveying. Yet, all have returned empty-handed. The island itself is the guardian of its secret. Its geology is a maze of lava tubes and caves that can collapse or become sealed by landslides. The constant torrential rainfall causes the landscape to shift and erode dramatically, meaning any man-made burial site from 2 centuries ago could now be buried under many feet of mud and rock. The dense primary rainforest vegetation is so thick that it can conceal a cave entrance just feet from a well-trodden path. This relentless failure has led many to question the treasure's very existence. Skeptics point out that there is no solid historical documentation in Spanish or Peruvian archives confirming that such a vast shipment of church treasure ever left Lima. They propose that the treasure was likely seized and melted down by revolutionary forces long before any ship could sail. The entire tale of Thompson, they argue, is a magnificent piece of pirate folklore, a story that grew in the telling, fueled by the genuine discoveries of smaller, older caches on the island from earlier pirates like Benito. Yet the legend persists with such power for a reason. Cocos Island has yielded clues that keep hope alive. In the 1930s, a Belgian treasure hunter claimed to have found a carved arrow pointing to a site near a waterfall. Others have found old, weathered navigational markers, pieces of pottery, and even a few gold coins. While not proof of the Lim, a hoard, these finds confirm the island was indeed used as a hiding place. The true treasure of the Lima Cathedral may ultimately be a paradox. It represents the final, desperate act of a dying empire, a testament to the overwhelming greed it inspired, and a symbol of nature's ultimate power to reclaim and conceal. Whether it rests in a waterlogged cave or exists only in the realm of story, its lure continues to draw explorers to that misty island, each one dreaming of being the one to finally lift the veil on one of history's most magnificent vanishing acts. Moving from the tropical mystery of Cocos Island, we travel to the heart of Europe for a treasure intimately tied to the very soul of a nation. At number 12, we seek the Royal Casket of Poland, a collection whose profound cultural and spiritual significance far outweighs its considerable material value. This was not merely a stash of gold and jewels, it was the sacred reliquary of Polish identity, a chest containing 72 of the nation's most precious historical relics, each one a tangible thread connecting the people to their kings, their saints, and their sovereignty. The contents of this casket read like an inventory from a royal treasury fused with a cathedral's most holy artifacts. It held the personal coronation insignia of Polish monarchs, including a golden chalice and a rock crystal paten used during the anointing of kings. It safeguarded priceless gold and silver reliquary crosses, one of which contained a fragment of the true cross. Perhaps most poignant were the personal items of Poland's revered saints. A pectoral cross that belonged to Saint Stanislaus, the nation's patron, and a ribbon from the robe of Saint Casimir. These objects were the foundational elements of the Polish state, used in coronations and during moments of national prayer, making the casket the ultimate symbol of divine right monarchy and national unity. The treasure's disappearance is a direct consequence of one of the most tragic and repeated events in European history, the partition of Poland. In 1794, as Russian and Prussian armies moved to carve up the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth for a second time, the nation rose in a desperate, heroic revolt led by Tadeusz Kościuszko. Facing the inevitable advance of enemy forces on Warsaw, the guardians of these national treasures, likely high-ranking church officials or members of the royal court, made the critical decision to hide them. The casket was entrusted to a man named Ignacy Kapostas, a politician and a prominent member of the Masonic Lodge. He was tasked with smuggling it out of the capital and concealing it in a location known only to a trusted few. ensuring it would not be captured and melted down or displayed as a trophy of war by the partitioning powers. The most persistent and captivating theory points to the underground cellars of a specific tenement house on Warsaw's Świętokrzyska Street, a building owned by Kaposters himself. The theory suggests the casket was walled up in a secret chamber, its entrance forever concealed by subsequent rebuilding and the devastating damage Warsaw sustained over the next century and a half. Other plausible locations include the dense network of crypts beneath the Capuchin Church, the cavernous cellars of the nearby Praga district, or even the grounds of the historic Kazimierz Palace. The search area, while focused on central Warsaw, is a labyrinth of potential hiding spots, each one buried under layers of subsequent history. This leads to the immense modern complication of any search. Warsaw is not a buried ruin, it is a vibrant modern European capital, rebuilt with painstaking effort after being almost completely leveled during World War II. Excavating beneath its historic center is a logistical and political minefield. Any significant archaeological dig would require shutting down major city infrastructure, gaining permission from a complex web of government ministries, the Catholic Church, and private property owners, all while navigating the intense public scrutiny that would surround a hunt for the nation's symbolic heart. The treasure is not considered lost in the conventional sense. It is a protected national heritage object. By law, anything found would belong to the Polish state, making any private treasure hunting not only impractical but illegal. This places the fate of the search almost entirely in the hands of academic archaeologists and state institutions, who must prioritize other, more certain excavations over what might be a decades-long, prohibitively expensive gamble. The royal casket's enduring power lies in this potent combination of historical certainty and geographical mystery. We know the treasure existed. We know it was hidden intentionally. We have a very good idea of who hid it and a general area of where it might be. Unlike mythical hoards, this one is documented and real, yet it remains shielded by the very city it was meant to symbolize. It represents the unbroken spirit of the Polish people, a physical embodiment of their culture that was saved from invaders not once, but twice, first from the Russians and Prussians in the 18th century, and then by remaining hidden from the Nazis in the 20th. To find it today would be to physically reunite the modern nation with the sacred instruments of its ancient sovereignty, a moment of profound historical completion. Until then, it sleeps somewhere beneath the bustling streets of Warsaw, a silent, golden heart waiting for its city to rediscover its heartbeat. Venturing from the symbolic heart of Europe to the sun-bleached, treacherous mountains of Mexico, we arrive at a treasure whose legend was so powerful it inspired one of the most iconic stories of greed and paranoia in modern literature. At number 13, we separate the layers of myth and history surrounding the treasure of the Sierra Madre. This is not a story of a single chest or a king's ransom, but the far more potent legend of an entire lost mine, a motherlode of gold so rich that it has drawn men to their doom for centuries and continues to whisper its siren call from the depths of the Sierra Madre Occidental. The modern world knows this story best through B. Traven's classic 1935 novel and the legendary 1948 film adaptation starring Humphrey Bogart. The narrative of Down on Their Luck Americans hunting for a lost gold mine in Mexico, only to have their venture consumed by greed and mutual suspicion, is a masterpiece of fiction. But Traven didn't invent the concept out of thin air. He was drawing from a deep well of very real folklore and historical accounts that had circulated along the Mexico-United States border for generations. The real treasure of the Sierra Madre is a tapestry woven from countless threads of lost mine legends, the most famous of which is the Lost Padre mine. The historical roots of these stories lie in the Spanish colonial era. Following the conquest in the 16th century, Spanish prospectors, often accompanied by Jesuit priests, fanned out across northern Mexico, establishing incredibly rich silver and gold mines. The rugged, remote Sierra Madre Mountains were a particularly rich hunting ground. However, these operations were perilous. They faced constant threats from hostile indigenous tribes, particularly the Apache, who fiercely resisted the invasion of their lands and the enslavement of their people. Many mines were attacked, their workers killed, and their locations lost as the trails to them were forgotten. Other mines were sealed by natural disasters, massive landslides, earthquakes, or flash floods that completely reshaped the mountainous terrain, burying the entrance to a lucrative vein under tons of rock and earth. The Lost Padre story typifies this. As the legend goes, a Jesuit priest operated a secret, fabulously rich mine with the help of local indigenous people. When the Jesuits were expelled from Spanish territories in 1767, the priest supposedly concealed the mine's entrance and its secret died with him. This single legend has spawned dozens of variations and specific named mines, like the Lost Teopa or the Lost Bolas de Plata, each with its own set of clues and a trail of hopeful prospectors. The challenges of searching for these lost bonanzas in the modern era are almost insurmountable, a large part of why they remain undiscovered. The Sierra Madre mountain range is a breathtakingly vast and brutal wilderness spanning over 900 miles in length. Its terrain is a nightmare of sheer canyons, dense, thorny chaparral, and towering peaks that soar over 10,000 feet. The climate alternates between scorching, waterless heat and torrential monsoon rains that trigger devastating landslides. This is not a place for casual exploration. It is a region where getting lost can easily mean death. Furthermore, this area has, for decades, been largely under the control of powerful drug cartels who use the remote canyons and old mining trails for smuggling routes. Venturing into this territory without permission is not just risky, it is potentially fatal. Modern treasure hunters aren't just fighting nature, they are navigating a volatile and extremely dangerous human landscape. So why, against all logic and odds, do people continue to search? The answer lies in the occasional, tantalizing discoveries that prove the legends aren't entirely fantasy. There are well-documented cases of lost mines being rediscovered. The most famous example is the Lost Teopa mine, located in the Sierra Madre of Sonora. After 3 centuries of searches based on cryptic Jesuit documents, it was finally relocated by an American explorer in the 1960s. While its modern commercial viability is debated, its discovery validated the core truth behind the stories. Rich mines were lost and they can be found. Beyond that, there are persistent rumors of prospectors, even in recent times, stumbling upon ancient Arastra's stone-grinding beds, weathered support timbers, or even old Spanish smelters deep in the wilderness, signs of long-vanished colonial activity. These finds, whether proven or apocryphal, are enough to fuel the dream for another generation. The search for the treasure of the Sierra Madre is therefore a pursuit of a ghost, but a ghost with a very real historical footprint. It represents the ultimate prospector's dream, the chance to find not just a handful of nuggets but the source itself, a vein of gold so pure it would set a person up for life. But as the fiction so brilliantly illustrates, the true nature of this treasure may not be the gold itself, but the transformative effect the search has on the human soul. It reveals our capacity for endurance, our thirst for adventure, and the dark shadow of avarice that can consume us when a dream seems within grasp. The lost mines of the Sierra Madre remain hidden, protected by a formidable combination of treacherous geography, human conflict, and their own legendary power to drive men mad. From the rugged mountains of Mexico, we now set sail for the stormy waters of the Indian Ocean, and a loss of such staggering proportions that it remains the undisputed white whale of shipwreck treasure hunting. At number 14, we confront the tragic fate of the Flor de la Mar, a Portuguese carrack whose sinking in 1511 represents what many consider to be the single greatest maritime treasure loss in all of human history. This wasn't just a ship carrying treasure, It was a floating king's ransom, a vast concentration of wealth so immense its loss sent shockwaves through the Portuguese Empire and continues to ignite passions 5 centuries later. The story of this incredible fortune begins with the ruthless conquest of Malacca, a wealthy sultanate that controlled the vital strait between Malaysia and Indonesia. In 1511, the legendary Portuguese commander Afonso de Albuquerque laid siege to the city, recognizing its strategic importance as the gateway to the spice trade of the East Indies. After a brutal assault, the city fell, and the Portuguese spent months systematically looting it. They emptied the Sultan's palace and the treasury houses of generations of accumulated wealth. Historical accounts describe a hoard of almost mythical proportions, over 60 tons of gold in the form of ingots and magnificent artifacts, 200 chests overflowing with precious uncut diamonds, emeralds, and rubies from the mines of India and Burma, countless exquisite silk garments woven with gold thread, and exquisitely crafted silver and gold objects dart from across Asia. All of this incalculable plunder, intended to crown Afonso de Albuquerque's triumphant return to Lisbon and solidify his king's power, was loaded onto a single, aging vessel, the Flor de la Mar. This was the first fatal mistake. The Flor de la Mar, or Flower of the Sea, was a venerable ship having served the crown for nearly a decade. It was large and capacious, which made it perfect for holding the massive haul, but it was also known to be unstable and notoriously difficult to handle in rough weather. Albuquerque, eager to depart and perhaps overconfident, ignored the dangers and set sail for home with his empire's future wealth crammed into its creaking hold. The journey was doomed from the start. As the fleet navigated the volatile strait off the northern coast of Sumatra, they were caught in a violent and sudden tropical storm. The Flor de la Mar, overburdened and unseaworthy, was thrown against the razor-sharp reefs. Its hull was torn open, and within moments the ship and its unimaginable cargo plunged to the seabed. Afonso de Albuquerque, one of history's great military minds, survived the wreck, but his reputation did not. He returned to his king not with the wealth of empires, but with a tale of catastrophic loss. The sheer scale of the treasure, combined with its documented existence, has made the wreck of the Flor de la Mar the ultimate prize for modern salvors. The potential value is almost beyond calculation, with conservative estimates placing it in the billions of dollars. The problem has never been a lack of desire to find it, but the immense, almost supernatural difficulty of the task. The primary challenge is the location. The ship went down in the Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest and most treacherous shipping lanes in the world. The waters are notoriously murky, with visibility often reduced to mere inches, and are crisscrossed by powerful, unpredictable currents that constantly shift the seabed itself. This isn't a static search grid. The sand and silt are in a perpetual state of motion, meaning any wreckage could be buried under dozens of feet of sediment or have been scattered across miles of ocean floor by 500 years of storms and tide. This has not stopped numerous attempts, each more ambitious than the last. In the 1980s and 90s, the Indonesian government granted a series of contracts to professional salvage firms, most notably to the Canadian company Ventures Limited. These operations employed sophisticated side-scan sonar and magnetometers to survey vast areas of the suspected wreck site. They did indeed find a promising wreck and even recovered some fascinating artifacts like cannons and porcelain, but not a single gold coin or gemstone from the Malacca hoard. This has led to a major point of contention and a compelling theory. Many experts now believe that the immense weight of the treasure itself may have acted against its recovery. They hypothesize that the sheer density of 60 tons of gold, combined with the violent force of the storm, could have torn through the rotting wooden decks of the aging ship as it sank. Instead of settling in a neat pile, the treasure chests and ingots may have plummeted straight down, punching through the soft seabed and burying themselves deep in a submarine trench, far beneath the main body of the wreck itself. This would mean that salvors for decades may have been meticulously excavating the wrong target, the ship's structure, while the real fortune lies hidden in a separate, deep sediment layer below it. The enduring allure of the Fleur de la Mar is a powerful cocktail of historical certainty and legendary reward. Unlike many lost treasures, there is no doubt this one existed. The official Portuguese records of the conquest and the loss are meticulously detailed. The treasure is real. This factual foundation, combined with the almost incomprehensible value at stake, ensures that the search will never truly end. It represents the ultimate what-if for treasure hunters, a verifiable Everest of sunken wealth, protected not by myth or curse, but by the raw, untamable power of the ocean itself. It is a siren's call from the depths, a reminder of the immense price of imperial ambition and the ocean's formidable ability to guard its secrets against all who would dare to reclaim them. Leaving behind the sunken galleons and oceanic depths, our quest now takes us into the arid, unforgiving landscape of the American Southwest, to a place where the desert sun beats down on a mystery written in blood and gold. At number 15, we enter the treacherous domain of the Superstition Mountains and the legend that has defined them for over a century, the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. This is a tale that perfectly encapsulates the intoxicating and often fatal allure of the American gold rush dream, a story where the line between fact and folklore is as blurred as a desert mirage. The legend's central figure is Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant Dutchman, being a common American mispronunciation of Deutsch, who prospected in Arizona during the late 1800s. As the story goes, Waltz, either through his own discovery or by being shown the location by a member of the Peralta family who originally mined the area, stumbled upon a fantastically rich gold vein. We're not talking about a few nuggets here. This was an exposed outcropping of gold so pure that it could be pried from the rock with a knife. Waltz would periodically arrive in the nearby settlements of Phoenix or Mesa with his saddlebags filled with incredibly high-grade gold ore, enough to finance a comfortable life, but he always guarded the mine's location with a paranoid intensity. On his deathbed in 1891, he supposedly gave a cryptic, rambling set of directions to a caretaker, a deathbed confession that has launched 1,000 expeditions and countless tragedies. The clues often involve a distinctive landmark called the Weaver's Needle, a towering volcanic spire that acts as a natural compass point in the brutal wilderness. The first layer of this mystery is its geological plausibility. Could such a rich deposit actually exist? The answer is a surprising and compelling yes. The Superstition Mountains are not just a random pile of rocks, they are the eroded remnants of a massive volcanic caldera. Geologically, this is exactly the type of environment where hydrothermal activity forces mineral-rich water into fissures in the rock, creating veins of gold and silver. The mountains are littered with evidence of ancient volcanic activity, and importantly, with signs of much smaller-scale mining operations from the Spanish and Mexican eras. The Peralta family from Sonora, Mexico, did indeed have mining claims in the area in the 1840s before they were allegedly attacked by Apache warriors. So, the legend is rooted in a very real geological and historical context. There is gold in the Mthar Hills, just not usually in the fantastical, bonanza-style quantities the Dutchman story describes. This tantalizing possibility has drawn an endless stream of treasure hunters into the superstitions for more than 130 years, and the mountains have earned their name in the most grim way possible. The range is often called the most deadly treasure hunting ground in the United States. Dozens of men, and likely many more whose disappearances were never recorded, have vanished or died under mysterious circumstances while searching for the Dutchman's mine. Some fell from cliffs in the rugged terrain. Others succumbed to dehydration and heat stroke in the brutal summer temperatures that regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit. But a disturbing number have been victims of violence, found shot or with their heads nearly severed, their campsites ransacked. This has fueled a dark sub-legend of a curse protecting the mine, or stories of a mysterious rifle-tailing guardian who ensures the secret never gets out. In reality, the dangers are a combination of the environment's inherent lethality and the desperate greed the hunt can inspire, turning men against each other in the isolated vastness of the desert. This leads to the most perplexing question for the modern mind. In an age where we can map the ocean floor from space and use satellites to find buried cities, why has this mine, supposedly in a defined mountain range, never been officially located? Modern geological surveys and advanced sensing technology like LiDAR and aerial magnetometry have indeed been used throughout the superstitions. They have successfully identified old, played-out mines and minor mineral deposits, but nothing matching the legendary description of the Dutchman's ledge. There are several convincing theories for this failure. First, the mine might simply be a pocket deposit, a small, incredibly rich but geographically isolated vein that was entirely excavated by Waltz and the miners before him. Once it was worked out, there would be nothing left to find, turning the legend into a ghost story about a treasure that no longer exists. Another, more intriguing possibility is that the mine's entrance was sealed by a massive earthquake that rattled the region in the 1880s, a seismic event that could have triggered a landslide large enough to completely bury the opening under hundreds of thousands of tons of rock, hiding it from view forever. The most pragmatic theory, however, is that the entire story is an elaborate cocktail of exaggeration, tall tales, and the misremembered accounts of a few small, legitimate finds. Jacob Waltz was a real person, and he did have gold. He was likely a very successful small-time prospector who knew how to work several modest claims, and his secretive nature and those deathbed mutterings were spun into the grand legend we know today by newspapermen and storytellers eager to sell a myth of the Old West. Yet the dream refuses to die. Every year, new seekers are drawn to the Superstition Mountains, armed with old maps and new technology, driven by the same hope that has fueled this quest for generations. The true power of the Lost Dutchman's mine may not be in the gold itself, but in the eternal human desire for a life-changing discovery, for a secret that lies just beyond the next ridge, waiting to transform the one who finds it. It is a perfect, self-perpetuating mystery, protected by the harshness of the land and the enduring power of a story too good to ever let go. Leaving behind the sun-scorched canyons of the American West, we now sail across the Mediterranean to a sun-drenched island fortress steeped in faith, warfare, and whispers of unimaginable wealth. Securing our 16th spot is the fabled treasure of the Knights of Malta, a hoard not just of gold and jewels, but of sacred relics and the accumulated financial might of Europe's most formidable fighting monks, all hidden away before one of history's most humiliating surrenders. The Knights Hospitaller, as they were formerly known, were a military and religious order born in the Crusades. After being driven from their stronghold on Rhodes, they were granted the island of Malta by Emperor Charles V in 1530. Over the next 268 years, they transformed this rocky outcrop into an impregnable bastion, building the magnificent fortified city of Valletta. But their power was not just military, it was profoundly financial. As a sovereign entity, the order amassed staggering wealth through a combination of papal grants, donations from noble families across Europe who sent their younger sons to join, and incredibly lucrative privateering state-sanctioned piracy against Muslim shipping in the Mediterranean. Their treasury swelled with captured gold, silver, precious gems, and sacred artifacts rescued from or gifted for the Holy Land. Most famously, they were said to possess a magnificent solid gold altarpiece and the revered Emerald Cup, believed by some to be the actual Holy Grail itself. This entire empire of faith and fortune came crashing down with shocking speed in 1798. Napoleon Bonaparte, en route to his campaign in Egypt, made a courtesy call on Malta with his powerful fleet. The order, which had grown complacent and was riven with internal division, was in no state to resist. the French forces landed and secured the island in a matter of days with barely a shot fired. But as Napoleon's troops marched into Valletta, they made a frustrating discovery. The vast treasury of the knights, which they had expected to seize to fund their eastern expedition, was gone. The vaults were nearly empty. In the days leading up to the invasion, the knights had executed a brilliant and secretive operation. Using their intimate knowledge of the city they had built, they secreted their entire movable wealth into a labyrinth of tunnels, cisterns, and hidden chambers carved deep into the limestone bedrock beneath the city's streets and bastions. This leads us directly to the modern hunt. Valletta is literally built on a Swiss cheese of subterranean spaces. There are miles of documented tunnels, siege countermines designed to intercept enemy sappers, secret escape routes from the Grandmaster's palace, and vast cathedral-like reservoirs that held the island's precious water supply. It is within this hidden world that the treasure is believed to rest. Modern archaeological efforts have been tantalizing. Surveys using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies have indeed revealed previously unknown voids and chambers deep beneath known landmarks, spaces that don't appear on any historical blueprint. The challenge, and the primary reason these anomalies haven't been fully explored, is the site's prestigious status. In 1980, the entire city of Valletta was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its outstanding cultural value to humanity. This protection creates a fascinating conflict for treasure hunters. Any attempt to excavate or drill into these potential hiding places would require overcoming a monumental bureaucratic hurdle. Permits would need approval from multiple layers of Maltese heritage authorities and could potentially be vetoed by UNESCO itself, as any invasive digging could risk damaging the structural integrity of the centuries-old buildings above or destroying invaluable archaeological context. The treasure is protected not by a curse or impossible geography, but by international treaty and a global commitment to preservation. The Maltese government's stance is understandably cautious. Their priority is safeguarding the historical fabric of their capital city, not pursuing a risky and potentially destructive hunt for gold that might not even be there. Beyond the official channels, there are persistent rumors of a secret map, passed down through generations of a select few who know the treasure's true resting place. Some believe the wealth was not hidden for recovery, but was instead a final act of devotion, a permanent offering to sanctify the island they were losing. Others speculate that a significant portion was smuggled out by loyal knights to their estates in France and Italy, integrated into private fortunes and lost to history. The true treasure of the Knights of Malta may therefore be a multifaceted one. It is the physical gold and sacred relics that could still lie in a dark, silent chamber. It is the historical intrigue of a military order's last, defiant act against a conqueror. And it is the enduring mystery of a secret world beneath our feet, a mystery that international law and the sheer weight of history conspire to keep perfectly and perhaps permanently preserved. And now our journey takes us to the final, chaotic days of the American Civil War, and to a treasure whose disappearance was born from the desperation of a collapsing nation. At number 17, we pursue the lost treasure of the Confederate treasury, a fortune in gold and silver that seemingly evaporated into the southern night, leaving behind a trail of rumors, buried chests, and a historical mystery that continues to tantalize historians and treasure hunters alike. By the spring of 1865, the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, was falling. As Union forces closed in, President Jefferson Davis and his cabinet were forced to flee southward to Danville, Virginia, hoping to reorganize and continue the fight. They didn't leave empty-handed. Accompanying them was a significant portion of the Confederate treasury, a last financial hope for their cause. This wasn't a single, neat stack of gold bars. Historical records, including memos from Confederate officials, describe a chaotic assemblage of wealth. It included Mexican silver dollars, gold coins, both American and foreign, silver ingots, and even raw gold nuggets, all packed into wooden crates and loaded onto a train. The most famous and heavily mythologized component was a huge cache of gold bullion from the banks of Richmond, but the exact total remains hotly debated, with estimates ranging from $500,000 to well over $2 million in period value, a sum that would easily exceed $100 million today. The treasure's path south is a story of increasing panic and disintegration. The train journey was slow and perilous, shadowed by the advancing Union cavalry. When the group reached Danville and found it untenable, the flight continued into North Carolina and then Georgia. It was during this desperate trek that the treasure began to fragment. Facing capture and needing to pay weary soldiers and officials, the Confederate leaders dispersed some of the funds, but a significant portion was deliberately hidden to keep it from falling into Union hands. The most credible accounts point to a specific event in Washington, Georgia, a small town that briefly became the final headquarters of the Confederate government. Here in early May 1865, with Union troops just hours away, a group of officials, including Treasurer Edward M. Tidball and Captain William H. Parker, were tasked with secreting the remaining treasury. They are said to have buried the crates in the dead of night, possibly in a local cellar, a nearby wood, or even at the bottom of a well, creating a map that was later lost or destroyed. This singular act of concealment has sparked a treasure hunt that has lasted for a century and a half. The primary search area focuses on a corridor from Danville, Virginia, through the backcountry of North Carolina and into the heart of Georgia around Washington and Wilkes County. Countless theories have emerged, each with its own compelling, if unproven, evidence. One of the most persistent involves a sunken riverboat. As the story goes, a contingent of soldiers attempted to ferry part of the treasure down the Savannah River, only to have their vessel scuttled by Union artillery or sunk in a storm, taking its golden cargo to the muddy bottom. Salvage operations on the river have turned up Civil War-era artifacts, but no definitive treasure trove. Another theory suggests the gold was hidden in a network of caves in the Appalachian foothills, a natural vault known only to a few local guides who took the secret to their graves. Perhaps the most pragmatic theory is that the treasure was never buried at all, but was quietly deposited into the vaults of sympathetic banks in Georgia and the Carolinas. After the war, these banks, fearing confiscation by the victorious Union, would have had every reason to deny its existence, allowing the funds to be slowly integrated back into the local economy, its origin obscured by time and deliberate silence. Modern searches continue, armed with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar, scouring old homesteads and riverbanks, yet the same fundamental problems persist. The historical record is frustratingly vague, pieced together from conflicting memoirs written years after the fact. The landscape itself has changed dramatically, with forests regrown, rivers shifted course, and old landmarks long since vanished. Furthermore, any discovery would trigger an immense legal battle over ownership, pitting the finder against state and federal governments, and potentially the descendants of the Confederate States. The lost Confederate treasury represents more than just missing money. It is the ghost of a failed nation, a physical remnant of a cause that was lost. Its enduring mystery lies in that potent combination of documented history and elusive reality, a fortune that slipped through the fingers of a dying government and into the realm of enduring legend. Continuing our journey through history's greatest missing fortunes, we arrive at a story of imperial ambition, nature's fury, and a ghost ship that has stubbornly refused to give up its secrets. At number 18, we set sail with the ill-fated Spanish treasure fleet of 1715, focusing on the crown jewel of the entire armada, the legendary San Miguel, a vessel whose disappearance with the most valuable cargo represents the single greatest unresolved loss from the golden age of Spanish galleons. The stage for this catastrophe was set by a simple yet powerful imperative: wealth. For 2 centuries, the Spanish Empire operated a meticulously planned system where fleets would sail to the New World, collect a year's worth of extracted treasure, and then rendezvous in Havana for the dangerous return voyage to Spain. The 1715 fleet was particularly momentous. It was a combined armada consisting of both the floater from Veracruz, carrying the riches of Mexico, and the galeons from Cartagena, bearing the wealth of Peru and Panama. After months of delays, the fleet, now 12 ships strong and crammed with an almost unimaginable fortune, finally set sail from Havana on July 24, 1715. Aboard were the combined treasures of an entire year, chests overflowing with silver pesos and pieces of 8 gold doubloons, emeralds from Colombian mines, and priceless worked silver and jewelry. But the mightiest ship of all was the San Miguel, the designated capitana or flagship. As was tradition, it carried the most valuable and prestigious items reserved for the royal court, including the Royal Fifth, the crown's 20% share of all New World treasure, and a special shipment of private wealth and jewels belonging to high-ranking nobles and merchants. Just a week into their journey, as the fleet sailed north along the Florida coast aiming for the Gulf Stream's current, they were overtaken by a meteorological monster. A hurricane of unprecedented ferocity descended upon them. For the sailors, it was a biblical-scale apocalypse. Winds estimated at over 100 miles per hour shredded sails and snapped masts. Mountainous waves pummeled the heavy, treasure-laden galleons, driving them helplessly onto the razor-sharp coral reefs off the coast of Florida. In a matter of hours, 11 of the 12 ships were shattered and sent to the bottom, their wreckage and crew scattered across 50 miles of coastline from present-day Fort Pierce to Sebastian Inlet. Over 1,000 lives were lost, and a fortune worth, in today's value, well over $400 million was spilled onto the ocean floor. Recovery efforts began immediately by the Spanish, who managed to salvage about half of the treasure over the next few years, but the vast storm-shifted seabed and the relentless attacks of pirates made the task impossible to complete. This is where the mystery of the San Miguel deepens. While the wrecks of the other 11 ships have been largely located and extensively salvaged by modern treasure hunters, most famously by Mel Fisher's company in the 1960s, the flagship has never been found. Contemporary Spanish salvage maps and documents are very clear. They knew approximately where it went down, yet they could never locate it. This is the central, baffling enigma. Why has this, the largest and most valuable ship in the fleet, remained hidden while its sister ships have given up their gold? The prevailing theory is one of tragic irony. As the flagship, the San Miguel was likely the best-built and most seaworthy vessel. Historians and marine archaeologists speculate that its captain, aware of the impending doom, made a last, desperate gamble. Instead of letting the storm drive him onto the reefs with the others, he might have tried to turn the ship east away from the coast in a bold attempt to ride out the hurricane in the open ocean. If this happened, the San Miguel would have been alone, battling the storm's full fury. It may have survived the initial impact only to succumb miles offshore, sinking in deep, abyssal waters far beyond the continental shelf. This would place its wreckage in depths of thousands of feet, a realm unreachable by 17th century salvage and immensely challenging for modern technology. This theory transforms the search from a coastal salvage operation into a deep-sea quest. The potential prize is what makes this one of the most compelling hunts. The San Miguel's manifest listed items that would be the crown jewels of any museum today. We are not just talking about coins and ingots. It was carrying unique, custom-made pieces, a solid gold service meant for a Spanish duke, chests of uncut Muso emeralds from Colombia considered the finest in the world, and religious artifacts destined for the royal chapel, all crafted with a level of artistry that has been lost to time. Finding the San Miguel would be like discovering a pristine time capsule from the absolute peak of the Spanish Empire, a collection of objects that were the very embodiment of global power and opulence. Modern efforts to find the wreck have been fraught with difficulty and frustration. The search area is not a neat, contained box, it is a vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The deep water theory means surveys must employ autonomous underwater vehicles and sophisticated side-scan sonar to map the seabed at profound depths, an incredibly expensive and time-consuming process. Furthermore, the Gulf Stream is a powerful, relentless current that has likely carried any scattered debris field for miles, making pinpointing an exact location a monumental task. The San Miguel, therefore, remains the ultimate prize of the era of Spanish treasure galleons. It represents a double mystery, the historical puzzle of its captain's final, fateful decision, and the modern technological challenge of finding a needle in a million-square-mile haystack. It is a ghost ship in the truest sense, carrying the dreams of an empire and the hopes of every treasure hunter who has ever looked out over the blue horizon of the Florida coast, wondering if the storm's greatest secret is still waiting to be unveiled from the dark, silent depths. Leaving behind the deep-sea mystery of the San Miguel, we now turn our attention inland to a landscape where the very air shimmers with illusion and the ground itself seems to conspire against discovery. For our 19th treasure, we venture into the vast, sun-baked expanse of the Mojave Desert, a place where legends of lost gold are as abundant as the sand and sagebrush, and where the line between fact and mirage is perpetually blurred. This is not the story of a single treasure, but a tapestry woven from countless tales of Spanish galleons that never sailed, padres who vanished without a trace, and prospectors who found fortunes only to lose them again to the desert's unforgiving embrace. Two legends in particular stand out for their enduring power and the tantalizing clues they offer. The first is the story of Thomas Pegleg Smith, a mountain man and trapper whose tale is a cornerstone of Western folklore. As the story goes, in 1829, Smith was traversing the arid wastes west of the Colorado River when he stopped to rest on a low, black-topped hill. While waiting for his companions, he noticed several small, heavy black rocks littering the ground. Needing something to whittle, he picked one up and discovered, to his astonishment, that it was not rock at all, but a solid lump of gold, its surface darkened by a thick, desert-varnished crust. He allegedly filled his pockets with these black gold nuggets, but in a moment of legendary bad judgment, abandoned them later on his journey when they grew too heavy, believing them to be merely iron pyrite fool's gold. He spent the rest of his life and lost a literal leg in the attempt, trying to relocate that specific, unmarked hill in a sea of identical desert mesas. The second great legend is that of the Breyfogle mine. Joshua Breyfogle was a prospector who, in the 1860s, either discovered a fantastically rich outcropping of gold or was given a sample of ore by Native Americans. He was later found wandering the desert, delirious and near death from dehydration, clutching a rich piece of gold quartz ore. He recovered but, like Pegleg Smith, could never retrace his steps to the source, launching a hunt that continues to this day. Separating the historical truth from the layers of exaggeration and outright fabrication is a monumental task, and the desert itself is the greatest accomplice in this obfuscation. The primary challenge for any seeker is the phenomenon of the mirage. In the Mojave's intense heat, light refracts crazily, making distant mountains appear to float, lakes materialize on dry salt flats, and familiar landmarks warp into unrecognizable shapes. A prospector's confident bearings taken in the cool of dawn can become a terrifying cartography of illusion by midday, rendering any map drawn from memory utterly useless. Compounding this is the desert's dynamic nature. This is not a static landscape. Violent flash floods, known as arroyos, can rip through canyons overnight, scouring the land down to bedrock and burying other areas under 10 feet of new sand and gravel. A mine entrance that was clearly visible one year could be completely sealed or exposed 100 yards away the next. The desert doesn't just hide its secrets, it actively rearranges them. This brings us to the critical question. In an age of satellite imagery and metal detectors, why do these desert legends remain unresolved? Modern technology, for all its power, meets its match in the Mojave. Metal detectors are often useless against the region's highly mineralized soil, which creates constant false signals. Ground-penetrating radar struggles with the varied density of desert rock and deep sand. And while satellites can map large-scale features, they cannot pinpoint a single gold-bearing quartz vein or a small cave entrance hidden under a creosote bush. Furthermore, many of the most promising search areas now lie within restricted military zones like the Naval Air Weapons Station, China Lake, or protected wilderness areas, placing them off-limits to random digging and exploration. Yet the stories persist with a vigor that suggests more than just tall tales. Small, tantalizing discoveries have been made over the decades that keep the dream alive. Prospectors have occasionally found nuggets with the distinctive black desert varnish described by Pegleg Smith. Pieces of gold quartz ore matching the description of Breyfogle's sample have been uncovered. There are well-documented records of Spanish colonial activity in the region, including enigmatic stone markers, Arastra's primitive ore grinding sites, and even the remains of old smelters, proving that someone was mining there centuries ago. The persistence of these myths, therefore, speaks to a deeper human need. They represent the ultimate prospector's dream, the chance to solve a puzzle, to outsmart the desert, and to find a reward so great it validates a lifetime of searching. The lost treasures of the Mojave are protected by more than just sand and stone. They are guarded by hope itself, a mirage of possibility that shimmers on the horizon for every soul who dares to look. The collapse of the Russian Empire in 1917 wasn't just a political earthquake. It was a financial black hole, swallowing a significant portion of the Romanov dynasty's almost unimaginable wealth and leaving behind a mystery that has captivated historians and treasure hunters for over a century. As the Bolshevik Revolution swept across the country, the extended imperial family, high-ranking aristocrats, and officials of the old regime faced an existential threat. Their immediate priority became the desperate preservation of their fortunes, a frantic effort to hide the symbols of their power from the oncoming tide. This wasn't a coordinated plan, but a chaotic, multi-pronged scramble, which is precisely why the fate of the Tsarist treasure remains so clouded in uncertainty and intrigue. We can broadly divide this lost wealth into two distinct categories, each with its own compelling disappearance. The first is the legendary imperial jewels, a collection of such opulence it defies modern comprehension. This was not a single crown and scepter, but a vast accumulation built over 2 centuries. It included the great imperial crown itself, crafted for Catherine II with nearly 5,000 diamonds and a massive spinel, but also countless other pieces. The Romanov nuptial crown, diamond necklaces, brooches the size of a human hand, and parias of emeralds and sapphires that were among the largest in the world. As the revolution gained fury, crates of these jewels were reportedly smuggled out of the Winter Palace and the Kremlin armory. A significant portion is confirmed to have been hidden in the cavernous cellars of the Kremlin, only to be discovered and catalogued by the new Bolshevik government. But inventories from the time are suspiciously incomplete, and persistent accounts suggest multiple caches were successfully concealed elsewhere. The most famous story involves a train. As White Russian forces retreated eastward ahead of the Red Army, they are said to have loaded a train with crates of gold bullion from the state reserves and the most precious of the Romanov jewels. The train, according to legend, became stranded in the immense frozen wilderness of Siberia, perhaps derailed by partisan fighters or simply lost in the chaos of the Civil War. It is imagined to still be there today, a ghost train resting in a forgotten tunnel or a remote valley. Its wooden cars rotted away to reveal a glittering hoard of gold bars and diamond tiaras, slowly being reclaimed by the permafrost. The second category is the state gold reserve itself. Prior to World War I, the Russian Empire possessed one of the largest gold reserves on the planet. During the Civil War, the anti-Bolshevik White Army, headquartered in the city of Kazan, came into possession of a vast portion of this gold, valued at over 650 million gold rubles at the time. As their position collapsed, they loaded this enormous wealth onto a train and transferred it east into the custody of Admiral Alexander Kolchak, the self-proclaimed supreme ruler of Russia. This gold, often called Kolchak's gold, is very well documented. It was used to pay for arms and supplies from foreign allies. However, when the Bolsheviks finally captured and executed Kolchak in 1920, they recovered only a fraction of the original amount. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth had simply vanished from the official ledgers. Some historians argue it was spent, squandered, or stolen by corrupt officials during the chaotic retreat. But more thrilling theories propose it was hidden. Perhaps it was buried in the vast territory between Omsk and Irkutsk. Maybe it was secretly shipped abroad and deposited in discreet Swiss or Japanese bank accounts, with the account numbers lost to a firing squad or a heart attack. The discrepancy in the accounting is a factual hole, and nature abhors a vacuum, especially one that can be filled with gold. This leads to the most perplexing question for the modern era. Why, after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, when previously sealed state archives were open to historians, has no definitive proof emerged to solve these mysteries? Researchers have combed through thousands of documents, from Bolshevik inventory lists to White Army communications. They have found clues, certainly, but no smoking gun. There are several compelling reasons for this enduring silence. First, the chaos of the period was absolute. Record-keeping was not a priority for armies in retreat or governments in their infancy. Many documents were undoubtedly destroyed, lost, or never created in the first place. Second, those who knew the secrets took them to their graves. Admiral Kolchak was executed. Countless nobles, bankers, and generals were killed in the purges or died in exile, their knowledge dying with them. Any secret vault in Europe would have required a custodian, and that chain of knowledge was almost certainly broken by the tumult of two world wars. Furthermore, the possibility of discovery is complicated by modern politics and geography. The theoretical locations are overwhelmingly vast and remote. Searching the entire Trans-Siberian Railway route for a lost train is a task that could take decades and cost billions. Any underground chamber beneath a historic palace in St. Petersburg, like the Peter and Paul Fortress, would be a protected archaeological site, making any large-scale excavation incredibly difficult to authorize. The treasure of the Tsars is therefore protected by a unique combination of historical chaos, the sheer scale of Russia, and the finality of death. It stands as a monument to the sudden, violent end of a 300-year dynasty, a glittering ghost of a world that was utterly erased, leaving behind only whispers of trains in the taiga and vaults behind forgotten walls. Plunging into the deeper currents of Bronze Age history, we encounter a mystery not of a single lost treasure, but of an entire lost civilization whose very identity is one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. At number 21, we confront the enigmatic Sea Peoples, a confederation of marauders who brought the entire Mediterranean world to its knees around 1200 BCE, and whose potential hidden wealth could rewrite our understanding of ancient history itself. The story of the Sea Peoples comes to us primarily from the boastful inscriptions of the Egyptians, the only civilization powerful enough to ultimately repel their devastating attacks. The mortuary temple of Pharaoh Ramesses III at Medinet Habu provides a stunning, graphic account. Its walls are carved with vivid scenes of a great naval battle, showing fierce warriors with distinctive horned helmets and feathered headdresses battling Egyptian forces from sleek, advanced ships. The inscriptions declare that these mysterious invaders came from the islands in the midst of the sea, and that they had already laid waste to entire empires before reaching Egypt's borders. No land could stand before their arms, the text claims, listing a cascade of fallen cities. Hattusa, the capital of the Hittite Empire, was burned to the ground. The great trading centers of Ugarit and Elalak in the Levant were utterly destroyed. Mycenaean Greece and the island of Cyprus collapsed into a dark age. This was not a simple raid. It was an apocalyptic event that shattered the interconnected world of the late Bronze Age and plunged the region into centuries of decline. And then, after their defeat by Ramesses III, the Sea Peoples vanished from the historical record as suddenly as they appeared, leaving behind one monumental question: who were they? This question is the key to the treasure, because their wealth would not have been a single hoard of gold, but a vast, mixed accumulation of loot pillaged from the greatest civilizations of the era. Imagine the spoils from sacking the royal palaces of the Hittites, known for their magnificent gold vessels and iron daggers, a metal more precious than gold at the time. Picture the treasures ripped from the temples of Ugarit, a cosmopolitan port city flush with gold from trade with Mesopotamia and Egypt. Envision the exquisite Minoan and Mycenaean artifacts they would have captured: bronze weaponry inlaid with silver, golden death masks, and intricate jewelry. The total bounty would have been a chaotic, unimaginable museum of Bronze Age art and wealth, a melting pot of cultures all plundered by a single, formidable force. So where could this immense fortune be today? Archaeologists and treasure hunters have pursued two primary, tantalizing theories. The first involves their shipwrecks. The Sea Peoples were a naval power, and the Mediterranean is littered with the wrecks of Bronze Age vessels. A single one of their warships discovered intact on the seabed would be an absolute game-changer. Its hull could contain not only the warriors' personal effects and weapons, revealing their origin, but also a sample of their plunder, perhaps a Hittite seal next to a Mycenaean cup, providing physical proof of their wide-ranging conquest. The search for such a wreck is focused along the southern coast of Turkey and the Levant, the likely route of their invasion fleet. However, the deep, sediment-shifting waters of the eastern Mediterranean have kept this secret well hidden. The second, and perhaps more promising, theory involves their hidden land bases. After their defeat, some surviving groups of Sea Peoples were settled by Pharaoh Ramesses in Canaan to serve as mercenaries. But what about their main bases before the invasion? If they came from the islands, as the Egyptians said, could their home ports be on Sicily, Sardinia, or the Aegean Islands? A secure harbor base would have been essential for assembling their fleet and storing their accumulated plunder before the final, decisive push into the eastern Mediterranean. Finding such a site would be the archaeological equivalent of discovering a pirate king's fortress, potentially containing the portions of the treasure they did not take to war. While the motherlode remains elusive, archaeology has begun to provide stunning clues. The discovery of the shipwreck at Uluburan off the coast of Turkey, though not a Sea People's vessel, shows the incredible wealth that was moving across the Mediterranean at this exact time. Its cargo of copper, tin, ivory, gold, and magnificent artifacts proves the scale of the riches that were in play. More directly, excavations at the Philistine city of Ashkelon, one of the settlements of the Sea Peoples identified in the Bible, have uncovered a distinct material culture very different from the local Canaanite one. Their pottery, for example, has clear stylistic links to the Mycenaean Greek world, suggesting that at least one group among the Sea Peoples may have originated from the Aegean. This is a vital piece of the puzzle, hinting that the Sea Peoples were not a single ethnic group but a coalition of dislocated peoples from across the Mediterranean, pushed from their homes by famine, earthquake, or war, and turning to piracy and conquest in a desperate fight for survival. The lost treasure of the Sea Peoples, therefore, is far more than gold. It is the knowledge of who they were and what caused the catastrophic Bronze Age collapse. Finding a major cache of their loot would be the ultimate Rosetta Stone, a collection of artifacts from a dozen different cultures all deposited in a single place at a single moment in time. It would allow historians to finally map their migration and conquests, to put names to the faceless warriors on the wall at Medinet Habu, and to understand the complex chain of events that destroyed a golden age and gave birth to a new world. Their treasure is the truth itself, waiting in a hidden cove or on a silent seabed, for the one who can finally solve history's most destructive cold case. Emerging from the ashes of a brutal religious crusade, our next treasure is one of faith, defiance, and a secret so potent it might shake the very foundations of Christianity itself. We arrive now at the haunting mystery of the Cathar treasure. This was not merely a hoard of gold, but the sacred legacy of a peaceful sect that the Catholic Church deemed its most dangerous enemy, a wealth that likely included not only material riches but also the most sought-after religious relic in history. The Cathars, also known as the Albigensians, were a Christian religious movement that flourished in the Languedoc region of southern France in the 12th and 13th centuries. Their beliefs, rooted in a form of dualism, were considered dangerously heretical by the Church in Rome. They believed the material world was the creation of an evil god, and that the path to salvation required renouncing all worldly possessions and living a life of extreme poverty and purity. This philosophy creates a fascinating paradox at the heart of our treasure hunt. If the Cathars spurned material wealth, what exactly was their treasure? The answer lies in what they cherished most, their faith. Their treasure was their collective knowledge, their sacred texts, and the few ritual objects they used. However, as the Church's pressure intensified into full-scale holy war, the Albigensian crusade, their pragmatic leaders, would have also needed to secure the physical wealth donated by their noble supporters to fund their resistance and care for their people. This crusade, launched by Pope Innocent III in 1209, was one of the most devastating in European history. It was a war of annihilation against a people and their culture. The Crusaders' message was chillingly simple: kill them all, God will know his own. As the Crusader armies closed in on the last Cathar strongholds, the fate of their treasure becomes the stuff of legend. The most famous event is the fall of the fortress of Montségur in 1244. After a long and brutal siege, the Cathars surrendered. They were granted a 15-day truce. What happened during those 15 days has fueled speculation for centuries. Witnesses reported seeing multiple people descending the treacherous cliff face from the castle under cover of darkness. The most persistent legend states that during this time, a small group of Cathar perfecti, their spiritual elite, smuggled their treasure out of the besieged fortress and into the vast network of caves and tunnels that weave through the French Pyrenees. Shortly after, over 200 Cathars who refused to renounce their faith were burned alive in a giant pyre at the base of the mountain. They died protecting a secret they carried to their graves. This is where the legend achieves its greatest potency. What was so valuable that it was worth sacrificing their lives to protect? The most tantalizing theory suggests it was not gold but knowledge. The Cathars were said to possess a collection of sacred books, possibly including lost Gnostic Gospels that presented a radically different version of early Christianity than the one endorsed by Rome. This library would have been considered more dangerous than any army, but the most spectacular claim is that the treasure included the Holy Grail itself. Not the chalice of popular imagination, but something the Cathars might have called the Sangreal or Sangreal, which can be translated as either Holy Grail or Royal Blood. Some researchers, following the work of authors like Henry Lincoln and Michael Bagent, have theorized this referred not to a cup but to a bloodline, the lineage of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, a secret heretical belief that the Cathars may have guarded. Others believe it was a physical object, an emerald that fell from Lucifer's crown, a dish from the Last Supper, or even the actual cup used by Christ. The primary search area focuses on the myriad caves, caverns, and forgotten passageways that perforate the mountains around Montségur and the nearby village of Rennes-le-Château, which itself is the center of later Grail-related mysteries. This is a landscape that seems designed for secrets. There are natural caves like the Lombrives, vast enough to hold a cathedral, and countless man-made tunnels dating back to the Visigothic era. Modern searchers have employed everything from simple spades to ground-penetrating radar. In recent years, archaeologists have made legitimate discoveries in the region, unearthing medieval artifacts and evidence of long-term habitation in some caves, proving they were used as refuges. However, no definitive, large-scale treasure trove has ever been found. The enduring fascination with the Cathar treasure lies in this powerful combination of historical tragedy and spiritual mystery. It represents the ultimate underdog story, a peaceful people brutally exterminated who may have had the last laugh by hiding their greatest truth from their persecutors. The treasure hunt is not just a search for gold, it is a quest for lost knowledge, for a history written by the losers, and for proof of a Christianity that might have been. It is a ghost that haunts the mist-shrouded peaks of the Pyrenees, a silent testament to a faith that valued spirit over matter, and a secret that continues to whisper to those who walk the ancient paths to the haunted castle of Montségur. Yet for all the riches recovered from Tutankhamun's tomb, it's crucial to remember his was a minor, rushed burial. His was the treasure of a boy king whose reign was nearly erased from history. This leads to a staggering possibility that has captivated archaeologists for over a century. What if the grander, intact tombs of Egypt's most powerful and famous pharaohs are still hidden in the valley, waiting to be found? We are talking about the ultimate prize of Egyptology, an untouched royal tomb from the pinnacle of Egypt's golden age. The most sought-after missing burials belong to the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, the rulers who built the empire. At the top of that list is the heretic king himself, Akhenaten. We know he was buried in his purpose-built capital at Amarna, but his mummy and the full contents of his tomb were desecrated and removed after his death during the frantic restoration of the old gods. The prevailing theory is that priests loyal to the god Ammon may have secretly moved his remains, and perhaps even a selection of his grave goods, to a hidden cache within the Valley of the Kings for safekeeping, a secret they took to their graves. Finding Akhenaten's final resting place would be the key to understanding the most radical and enigmatic period in Egyptian history. His tomb could contain a wealth of art in the unique, surreal Amarna style, along with writings that could finally explain his motivations for upending one of the most stable religious systems the world has ever known. But he is not alone. Also missing are the tombs of several powerful female rulers. The burial place of the great Queen Nefertiti, Akhenaten's wife and the most famous woman of ancient Egypt, remains one of the valley's most profound secrets. Some Egyptologists, like Dr. Nicholas Reeves, have put forward a revolutionary theory. After studying high-resolution scans of Tutankhamun's tomb, he proposed that the famous burial chamber might actually be the outer section of a larger tomb, and that hidden doorways, perhaps concealed behind plastered and painted walls, could lead to the much larger, undisturbed tomb of Nefertiti herself. This theory suggests that Tut's tomb was a last-minute addition to his stepmother's grander, pre-planned burial, a stunning possibility that would make it merely an antechamber to the main event. Other significant missing royals include Queen Ankhesenamun, Tutankhamun's wife and sister, and the pharaohs Ramesses VIII and the female pharaoh Tusret, whose tombs are documented but have never been located. The search for these lost tombs has moved far beyond the realm of guesswork and into the age of advanced technology. In recent years, teams have used non-invasive techniques like ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography to scan beneath the valley's surface. These scans have revealed tantalizing anomalies, subsurface voids that match the size and shape of tomb chambers, as well as linear features that look like man-made corridors and shafts. One of the most promising anomalies was detected in an area near the tomb of Ramesses VI, a potential void that some believe could be the entrance to an undiscovered royal tomb. Another significant scan identified a large void behind the north wall of Tutankhamun's burial chamber, fueling Dr. Reeves's theory about Nefertiti's tomb. These technological ghost stories provide the strongest evidence yet that the Valley of the Kings still holds its greatest secrets. So why, with these compelling clues, don't we just start digging? The answer lies in a complex web of modern challenges. First and foremost are the stringent permits required from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. They are incredibly cautious about granting excavation licenses, especially for invasive digging in the valley. Their priority is the preservation of what we already have. The valley is a fragile ecosystem of tombs suffering from humidity, salt damage, and the sheer impact of mass tourism. Drilling into a potential void based on a radar reading is an immense risk. A misstep could cause a collapse that damages both the undiscovered tomb and known adjacent ones. Furthermore, there is a strong desire within the Egyptian archaeological community to leave some treasures for future generations, trusting that even better, less invasive technology will be developed that can peer into the earth with absolute certainty before a single grain of sand is moved. Imagine for a moment what an intact tomb from the height of the empire could contain. Beyond the inevitable golden sarcophagi and jeweled death masks, we could find perfectly preserved organic materials, linens, wooden furniture, food offerings, and papyrus scrolls that have survived 3,000 years in a stable, sealed environment. These everyday items are often more valuable to historians than gold, offering an unparalleled window into the daily life, economy, and beliefs of the new kingdom. The discovery of a single new royal tomb, untouched by looters, would dwarf the wonder of Tutankhamun's find. It would be the archaeological event of the century, a direct conversation with the most powerful individuals of the ancient world, and a chance to rewrite the chapters of history they thought were forever closed. The valley holds its breath, keeping its last great kings and queens safe in the dark, waiting for the day we are wise enough to find them without destroying the very history we seek to uncover. Venturing from the sun-scorched tombs of Egypt to the vast, wind-swept grasslands of Eurasia, we encounter a civilization whose wealth was as formidable as their reputation for ferocity. At number 24, we ride onto the open steppe with the Scythians, the nomadic warrior culture whose legendary gold hoards have tantalized historians and treasure hunters for millennia. These were not a people who built pyramids or palaces. Their empire was the land itself, and their greatest treasures were buried with them beneath it, in colossal earthen mounds known as kurgans that still dot the landscape from the Black Sea to the borders of Mongolia. The primary source for their fabulous wealth comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who described their funerary customs in vivid and likely exaggerated detail. He wrote that when a Scythian king died, his body was embalmed and then paraded through his realm for 40 days of mourning. He was then taken to the land of the Gerhai, the royal burial grounds, and laid to rest in a massive subterranean chamber. The ceremony was one of breathtaking extravagance. The king was accompanied into the afterlife by a sacrificed concubine, his cup-bearer, cook, groom, messenger, and horses, all strangled to serve him in the next world. Then, to safeguard the secret of his gold-laden resting place, a gruesome final act was performed. A crew of servants was employed to build the kurgan mound over the tomb, and upon its completion, those same servants were immediately killed and buried around the perimeter, their bodies acting as a silent, permanent guard against grave robbers. The reality, as modern archaeology has confirmed, is scarcely less spectacular. While the scale of human sacrifice was probably not as vast as Herodotus claimed, the kurgans that have been excavated, such as the magnificent Tolstaya Mogila and Chertomlik mounds in Ukraine, have yielded some of the most stunning gold artifacts ever crafted by ancient hands. We are not talking about simple coins or ingots. Scythian gold is art in motion. It is a breathtaking fusion of Greek craftsmanship, acquired through trade with Black Sea colonies like Olbia, and unmistakably Scythian themes. We find exquisite pectoral plates depicting scenes of lions tearing apart stags and griffins battling horses, intricate golden combs showing warriors in battle, and delicate vase appliques with nomadic life scenes. Most iconic are the ornaments that adorn their horses and their own bodies: golden torques, elaborate belt buckles, and spectacular headdresses covered in roaring stags and other spirit animals, all executed in the distinctive Scythian animal style. These objects were more than wealth. They were symbols of status, power, and a deep spiritual connection to the fierce, untamed world they ruled. This brings us to the tantalizing modern hunt. While thousands of kurgans have been identified, the vast majority, particularly those in the most remote reaches of Russia, Kazakhstan, and Siberia, remain completely unexplored. The potential for discovery is staggering. An unplundered royal Scythian kurgan from the height of their power could contain a king's ransom in gold artifacts, but also perfectly preserved organic materials. The permafrost conditions in many Siberian burial mounds act as a natural deep freeze. Archaeologists have opened kurgans to find not just gold, but the ancient occupants themselves, their tattoos still visible on their skin, their clothing of felt and fur intact, and even the remnants of their last meal, a snapshot of nomadic life frozen in time for 2,500 years. This is the true treasure, an undisturbed window into the world Herodotus could only describe from second-hand accounts. However, the search for these kurgans is fraught with challenges far more complex than any Indiana Jones film. The first is the sheer, overwhelming geography. The steppe is an immense ocean of grass, and the kurgans, while large, are dots on a map millions of square miles in size. Finding them requires extensive aerial and satellite surveys, a costly and time-consuming process. The second, and perhaps greater, obstacle is politics. The heart of the ancient Scythian world is now fractured across multiple modern nations, each with its own strict laws regarding cultural heritage and archaeological excavation. Securing permits to dig in these regions is a bureaucratic labyrinth, and the areas are often so remote that mounting a proper expedition requires immense logistical planning and funding. Furthermore, the very conditions that preserve the treasures also protect them. The Siberian permafrost is a double-edged sword. While it keeps artifacts pristine, it also makes excavation a race against time. The ground is frozen solid for most of the year, granting only a brief summer window of a few weeks when digging is even possible. And as climate change gradually warms the region, it presents a new paradox. The thawing ground is making more kurgans accessible, but it is also threatening to destroy the very organic materials that have been preserved for millennia. Once exposed to air and warmth, a perfectly preserved felt rug or a wooden chariot can begin to decay in a matter of hours. The treasure of the Scythians is therefore caught between two eras, protected for centuries by ice and isolation, but now facing the twin threats of a changing climate and the ever-present danger of looting. Each unexplored kurgan is a time capsule on a precipice, holding the secrets of a people who defined the ancient steppe, waiting for the right team, with the right technology and respect for the past, to finally reveal its golden wonders to the modern world. Deep within the emerald heart of the Central American jungle, a civilization of staggering intellectual and artistic achievement built cities that touched the sky, only to have the forest reclaim them, guarding their most profound secrets with a relentless green embrace. For our 25th treasure, we venture into the realm of the ancient Maya, not in search of a single hoard, but for the missing heart of their royal lineage, the lost tombs of the great kings and queens whose untouched burial chambers remain the holy grail of New World archaeology. The Maya of the classic period, from around 200 to 900 CE, were masters of astronomy, mathematics, and monumental architecture. Their city-states like Tikal, Palenque, and Calakmul were ruled by divine kings known as Kayuhul Ajor, or Holy Lords. For these rulers, death was not an end but a transformational journey, and they were sent into the afterlife equipped with everything they needed to maintain their godlike status. This meant burial within the towering, sacred pyramids, accompanied by a wealth of funerary goods that boggled the mind. We are talking about intricately carved jade masks that covered the deceased's face, their green sheen symbolizing eternal life and water. We are talking about pectorals and ear spools of the same precious stone, polychrome ceramic vessels filled with offerings, spines of stingrays used for ritual bloodletting, and hieroglyphic texts painted on bark paper or carved into limestone. The most powerful rulers would have been entombed with objects of unimaginable craftsmanship and spiritual power, a collection that would represent the absolute pinnacle of pre-Columbian art and culture. Historical records, painstakingly deciphered from the thousands of glyphs adorning their monuments, tell us the names of these powerful rulers and often specify the locations of their burials. The problem is, we have found only a fraction of them. The tomb of the famed King Pakal the Great in Palenque was a monumental discovery, but what about the founder of his dynasty? What about the tombs of the early kings of Tikal who established its dominance? The Maya often built pyramids in layers like Russian nesting dolls. A new king would build a larger temple over the tomb of his predecessor, meaning the most ancient and likely richest burials lie deep within the cores of the largest structures, completely inaccessible without dismantling the monuments above them, an act of destruction no modern archaeologist would ever sanction. This is where the challenge of exploration becomes a battle against nature itself. The jungles of Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras are not a friendly wilderness. They are a dense, humid, and often impenetrable fortress of vegetation. Vines as thick as a man's arm strangle ancient stonework, roots pry apart mortar that has held for a millennium, and the constant, oppressive humidity accelerates the decay of any organic material not sealed in a dry chamber. Simply reaching these sites requires hacking through miles of dense undergrowth, all while contending with venomous snakes, biting insects, and the very real risk of tropical diseases. For centuries, this environment has been the greatest guardian of the Maya's secrets, allowing only glimpses of their grandeur while keeping the deepest vaults sealed. However, a technological revolution is now peeling back the green veil. The advent of LiDAR light detection and ranging has changed everything. This technology involves flying over the jungle with a special laser that can penetrate the dense canopy, digitally stripping away every leaf and vine to create a detailed map of the ground surface below. What these surveys have revealed is nothing short of revolutionary. Entire cities, completely unknown and swallowed by the jungle for over 1,000 years, are now being discovered. Vast networks of roads, sophisticated irrigation systems, and defensive earthworks have been mapped. Most excitingly for treasure hunters, LiDAR has identified anomalous structures, unnatural mounds, and architectural features hidden beneath the forest floor that are almost certainly unexcavated pyramids and temples. Each one of these is a potential king's tomb, a time capsule waiting for the right team to break the seal. So why, with this amazing technology pointing the way, are these tombs still lost? The answer lies in a combination of logistics, preservation, and a profound respect for the past. While LiDAR can show us where to look, it cannot tell us what is inside. Excavating a massive pyramid is a decades-long, multi-million-dollar endeavor that requires immense planning and a delicate touch. One wrong move could cause a collapse, destroying the very treasure you seek. Furthermore, the governments of Mexico and Guatemala, rightly protective of their cultural heritage, grant very few permits for invasive digging, especially on major, iconic structures. The priority is preservation and non-invasive survey. The greatest treasure of the Maya may not be the jade and gold itself, but the knowledge contained within an intact tomb. The discovery of a single new royal burial with its accompanying hieroglyphic texts could provide the missing pieces to the puzzle of the Maya collapse, clarify dynastic lineages, and reveal entirely new aspects of their religion and cosmology. It is this potential for world-altering knowledge, locked away in a dark, silent chamber for 1,000 years, that makes the lost tombs of the Maya the most intellectually thrilling treasure hunt on our list, a quest not just for gold but for understanding. Emerging from the mists of the North Sea, our next treasure belongs to a culture synonymous with both ruthless plunder and intricate artistry. We now delve into the world of the Vikings, not as mere raiders, but as sophisticated accumulators of wealth whose missing hoards represent some of history's most tantalizing buried secrets. The Norsemen were masterful opportunists, their longships carrying them from the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the sun-drenched coasts of the Mediterranean and the windswept isles of the North Atlantic. Everywhere they went, they amassed fortunes, and a significant portion of that wealth never made it back home, instead being hidden away in times of crisis or as offerings to their powerful gods. Among the most legendary of these missing fortunes is the lost treasure of King Harald Hardrada, often called the last great Viking king. His story is a saga in itself. Before claiming the Norwegian throne, Harald spent over a decade serving as a commander in the Varangian Guard, the elite mercenary force of the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople. This city was the wealthiest in the known world, and Harald and his men would have been handsomely paid in gold solidi and granted a share of the immense plunder from the empire's military campaigns. Contemporary sagas describe him sending vast amounts of treasure back to his ally, Prince Yaroslav in Kiev, for safekeeping. The amount was so great it supposedly took 3 ships just to carry the gold and precious goods. However, when Harald finally returned north to press his claim to the Norwegian crown, the entirety of this accumulated Byzantine fortune is not fully accounted for. Did he use it all to fund his wars? Or was a portion of this legendary wealth the fruit of his eastern service, hidden away in a secret cache in Norway or along the trade routes of Rus, waiting for a king who would never return after his death at the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066? Equally compelling is the mystery surrounding the Great Heathen Army, the massive coalition of Norse warriors that invaded and conquered large parts of England in the 9th century. For over a decade, this army rampaged across the kingdoms of Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia, extorting vast payments of silver and gold known as Danegeld from terrified Anglo-Saxon rulers. The chronicles of the time record payments that would amount to tons of precious metal. While the Vikings were known to spend their wealth freely on trade, feasting, and outfitting their ships, it defies belief that they carried every single ounce of this plunder with them at all times. Logic dictates that they must have established secure hidden caches across their occupied territories, burying chests of silver coins, hack silver, and stolen religious artifacts in the earth for retrieval later. The sudden and often chaotic nature of Viking life, with leaders falling in battle or being forced into a hurried retreat, means that many of these temporary banks were never reclaimed. The land itself became their vault. This theory is powerfully supported by the modern phenomenon of metal detectorists. Across England and Scandinavia, amateurs with metal detectors have unearthed astonishing Viking hoards, proving that the wealth was indeed buried. The discovery of the Curedale hoard in Lancashire in 1840, containing over 8,600 items including silver coins, jewelry, and ingots, or the more recent Watlington hoard found in Oxfordshire in 2015, demonstrates that these stashes are still out there. These finds, however, are likely the smaller, personal savings of individual chieftains or trading parties. They make us wonder about the truly colossal hoards that must have belonged to the army's overall leadership. Where is the main treasury of Ivar the Boneless or Ub Ragnarsson? These would be hoards of a different magnitude altogether, potentially containing the crown jewels of conquered Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, unique religious relics, and gold objects of unimaginable artistry lost to history. The Vikings were particularly skilled at hiding their loot for a reason. Their society was inherently mobile and often perilous. Burying treasure was a practical form of banking in a world without financial institutions. They chose their hiding spots with care, often using natural landmarks that held personal or spiritual significance, a distinctive grouping of stones, a lone, gnarled tree on a promontory, or a bend in a river they could easily recognize. These locations were committed to memory or shared through oral tradition, a system that worked perfectly until the person with the knowledge died unexpectedly. The acidic soils of northern Europe, while terrible for preserving organic materials like wood and leather, are excellent for preserving silver and gold, meaning any undiscovered hoard would likely be in a remarkable state of preservation, a frozen moment of Viking commerce and conquest. The greatest Viking hoard ever found is still out there, perhaps lying just inches beneath the pasture of an English farmer or deep within a forgotten Norwegian forest, a silent testament to the most formidable explorers and accumulators of the early medieval world. Yet for all the riches he amassed, the ultimate fate of the Persian treasury remains one of antiquity's most compelling enigmas. Following his decisive victory over Darius III, Alexander seized the imperial capitals of Susa, Ecbatana, and most famously Persepolis. Ancient historians like Plutarch and Diodorus Siculus describe the scene at Persepolis in almost mythical terms. They recount that in the royal storerooms, Alexander's men found a hoard that dwarfed all imagination, 120,000 talents of gold and silver, a sum so vast it would require 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to transport it. This was not merely coin, but the accumulated tribute of an empire that spanned from the Nile to the Indus River. Golden drinking vessels, intricately woven tapestries threaded with precious metals, jeweled swords and ceremonial weapons, and tons of silver bullion. For months, Alexander and his army feasted and planned their next campaigns, surrounded by a level of opulence that would never be seen again in the ancient world. Then the historical record becomes frustratingly vague. The official story is that Alexander, in a symbolic gesture to mark the end of the Persian Wars, ordered the palace at Persepolis burned. But what happened to the treasury? Some accounts suggest it was all loaded onto that massive train of pack animals and taken with him on his campaigns, gradually spent to fund his army's march across Asia. This seems logistically improbable. Moving such an immense fortune through hostile territories would have been a monumental risk. A far more intriguing theory, supported by several ancient sources, suggests that only a portion was taken. The bulk of the heaviest and most magnificent items, the solid gold statues, the enormous ceremonial thrones, the vast quantities of silver ingots, were considered too cumbersome to move. Instead, they were hidden. The logical place to secrete such a treasure was right there beneath their feet. Persepolis was built upon a massive artificial terrace, a labyrinth of subterranean storage chambers, drainage tunnels, and foundation vaults. It is entirely plausible that Alexander's engineers, or perhaps even remaining loyal Persian stewards, sealed the most monumental pieces of the royal treasure in these hidden spaces, creating a time capsule of Achaemenid power meant to be reclaimed at a later date that never came. The potential contents of such a cache would redefine our understanding of ancient Persian art and wealth. Imagine recovering the legendary golden vine of the Persian kings, a sprawling sculpted tree with emerald leaves and clusters of pearls for grapes, described by Greek historians as being large enough to provide shade for a banquet. Picture finding the solid gold coffin of Cyrus the Great, which was known to have been held at Pasargadae, or the magnificent pearl-encrusted throne of Darius himself. These wouldn't just be artifacts, they would be the very symbols of imperial authority, crafted by the finest artisans of the known world using techniques now lost to history. The artistic and historical value would be immeasurable, offering a direct, unbroken link to the court of the King of Kings. This leads to the central, frustrating reason this treasure remains undiscovered: modern geopolitics. The primary suspected locations, the terraces of Persepolis and the nearby tomb of Cyrus at Pasargadae, are not just archaeological sites. They are the foundational pillars of Iranian national identity. They are protected with immense reverence and are among the most studied and cherished monuments in the country. The Iranian government, justifiably proud of this heritage, is extremely cautious about permitting any invasive archaeological digging that could potentially damage the structural integrity of these sacred places. The idea of an international team, perhaps funded by foreign interests, using ground-penetrating radar to look for hidden chambers and then digging massive trenches is a non-starter. The permission for such an endeavor would be incredibly difficult to obtain, layered with concerns about cultural sovereignty and the preservation of the sites for future generations. Furthermore, the very nature of the search is complicated by the site's history. The terrace at Persepolis is a complex warren of known and unknown spaces. While some underground areas have been mapped, a thorough, modern geophysical survey of the entire platform has never been conducted. The potential for discovery is immense, but so is the risk of causing collapse or damage to the majestic ruins above. The lost treasure of the Persian Empire is therefore protected by a far more powerful force than any curse. It is guarded by the solemn duty of a nation to protect its past, and by the complex political realities that make a treasure hunt of such scale all but impossible. It represents a paradox, a treasure of world historical importance that can only be found in a place where the world is not allowed to look, sleeping in silence beneath the stone feet of the great palaces, waiting for a time of greater openness and a technology so advanced it can see through stone without ever disturbing a single grain of sand. Imagine the sheer scale of the operation, a continuous thread of commerce stretching for thousands of miles. For centuries, the Silk Road was not a single path but a sprawling network of trade routes connecting the imperial court of China to the bustling markets of Rome. Along these paths traveled caravans of countless camels, each beast of burden laden with sacks of priceless goods. They carried bolts of silk so fine they could be drawn through a ring, pungent spices like cinnamon and pepper that were worth their weight in gold in Europe, and ingots of silver and jade. But the journey was a gauntlet of unimaginable peril, and many of these trading parties, with their guards, merchants, and animals, simply vanished into the vastness of Central Asia, taking their incredible wealth with them into the sands. The primary agent of their disappearance was the landscape itself. The Taklamakan Desert, whose name famously translates to "once you go in, you will not come out," is a merciless sea of shifting sand dunes. It is the realm of the sudden and catastrophic sandstorm, a phenomenon that can blot out the sun and reshape the entire desert floor in a matter of hours. A caravan caught in such a maelstrom would have no recourse. The fine, choking dust would overwhelm both man and animal, and the relentless wind would bury them under meters of sand, entombing them in a dry, sterile grave. Their cargo, meant for a distant emperor, would become a forgotten time capsule, sealed by nature's most powerful force. Other caravans fell victim to the brutal and unpredictable mountain passes like the Pamirs, where avalanches or flash floods could sweep an entire train off a narrow ledge, consigning them to an icy oblivion for millennia. Yet nature was not the only predator. The very value of the goods made the caravans fat targets for bands of ruthless raiders. The shifting political loyalties of the region meant that a route considered safe one season could be controlled by hostile tribes the next. Bandits, knowing the caravans were slow-moving and heavily laden, would descend from the hills to slaughter the guards and make off with the loot. However, sometimes the attack would go wrong, or a pursuing army would corner the thieves themselves. In the chaos, the treasure could be hidden in a remote cave or buried in a riverbank, a secret that died with the last participant in the struggle. These caches would be particularly rich, containing not just trade goods but the personal plunder of multiple raids, a concentrated hoard of valuables from across the known world. The potential contents of these lost caravans are what fuel the dreams of archaeologists. This wouldn't be a single king's treasure, but a snapshot of globalized ancient commerce. One could find a stunning fusion of cultures in a single burial. Delicate Roman glassware packed next to intricate Chinese lacquer boxes, solid gold Byzantine coins resting alongside carved Indian ivories, and bundles of Tibetan musk sealed with Persian wax. Because of the arid desert conditions, organic materials that would rot anywhere else on Earth could be perfectly preserved. We might discover bolts of silk in colors we didn't know the ancients could create, scrolls of lost literature written in forgotten languages, and even the remnants of food and spices, allowing us to literally smell the past. The most profound discovery, however, wouldn't be gold but knowledge. A merchant's records, written on bamboo slips or parchment, could detail entire trade networks, prices, and political relationships, rewriting our understanding of the ancient economy. Modern searches for these lost caravans are a race against time and a battle with an ever-changing environment. The same dunes that conceal these sites also move, occasionally revealing a glimpse of a wooden cartwheel or a bleached bone before swallowing it again. Expeditions now employ satellite imagery to track these subtle changes and use ground-penetrating radar to peer beneath the sand. The thrill of the hunt is palpable, for any dark spot on a radar scan in the Taklamakan could be the tomb of a vanished caravan, a silent train of treasures that never completed its journey, holding within it the lost stories of the merchants who dared to connect the world. But perhaps the most enduring theory is also the most audacious, that the Templar fleet did not sail north to Scotland, but west into the open Atlantic, following sea charts that were centuries ahead of their time. This idea hinges on the possibility that the Order, through their extensive travels and access to both Christian and Islamic libraries, had pieced together navigational knowledge hinting at lands far beyond Europe. Proponents of this theory point to the enigmatic Westford Knight in Massachusetts. A weathered rock carving some claim depicts a 14th century knight with a shield and sword, and the mysterious Newport Tower in Rhode Island, a stone structure whose architectural style, some argue, resembles a Templar baptistry or watchtower far more than any later colonial building. Most famously, this theory is intertwined with the endless saga of Oak Island, Nova Scotia. For over 2 centuries, treasure hunters have been drawn to this place by a strange depression known as the Money Pit, a complex, booby-trapped shaft that has swallowed fortunes and claimed lives in a fruitless search for something. While no definitive Templar artifacts have been found, the sheer engineering complexity of the site suggests it is far more than a natural formation, fueling speculation that it could be a massive Templar repository, designed to protect their sacred relics until the time was right for their return. Yet, despite these compelling narratives and potential landing sites, a fundamental question remains: why has no physical evidence of the fleet itself ever been found? If dozens of medieval ships made a transatlantic crossing, or even just sailed to Scotland, surely some trace would remain. The answer lies in the formidable challenge of underwater archaeology. The sea is the world's greatest keeper of secrets. Wooden ships from this era, if they wrecked, would have been pounded to splinters by centuries of waves and storms. Any metal fastenings would have corroded away, leaving only the most durable items like stone ballast or an occasional cannon to be scattered across the seabed and buried under layers of shifting sediment. Searching for these remains is like looking for a single, specific needle in a 1,000,000 square-mile haystack. The waters around La Rochelle have been extensively dredged and developed as a modern port, likely destroying any fragile evidence that might have survived. The coast of Nova Scotia is a graveyard of thousands of ships from all eras, making the identification of a single, specific medieval wreck amidst that clutter a monumental task. Furthermore, the funding and permits required for such a speculative open water search are incredibly difficult to secure, especially when the historical evidence for the fleet's very existence is based more on its absence from records than on its confirmed presence anywhere else. The lost Templar fleet, therefore, continues to captivate because it represents the ultimate historical cold case, a mystery built on a void in the archives. A silent departure that launched 1,000 dreams and sent generations of seekers scanning the horizon, forever wondering about the final destination of the world's most enigmatic sailors and the profound secrets their ships may have carried. Into the unknown, delving into the deepest recesses of human belief, we arrive at a treasure that transcends mere wealth, a concept where the value is not in the object itself, but in the profound, terrifying journey it was forced to undertake. For our final entry, we explore the ultimate sacred offering, the treasure of the ancient underworld. This is not loot hidden from invaders or pirates, but a fortune deliberately given away, surrendered to the gods of the deep earth and the dark water in rituals so potent they were meant to bridge the gap between the living world and the realm of the dead. Across countless cultures, the most powerful deities were not those who dwelled in the sky, but those who ruled the chthonic depths, the underworld. These gods controlled the cycles of life and death, the harvest from the soil, and the terrifying mystery of what came after. To appease them, to ask for their favor, or simply to ward off their wrath, our ancestors made sacrifices of unimaginable value. They didn't just drop a coin in a well. They committed their most precious possessions to places from which there was absolutely no return. In the limestone bedrock of the Yucatan Peninsula, the Maya believed that natural sinkholes known as cenotes were portals to Xibalba, their terrifying underworld. During times of drought or crisis, they would conduct ceremonies at the edge of these gaping, water-filled holes, but they didn't just offer maize or pottery. Archaeological dredging of the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza has revealed a horrifying and awe-inspiring collection of gifts, exquisite gold discs hammered with intricate designs, finely carved jade jewelry that signified life and power, and gruesome evidence of human sacrifice. The most valuable possessions of the community, along with the lives of their people, were given to the gods below, sinking into the silent, dark water forever. This practice was a global phenomenon. In ancient Greece, pilgrims would travel to remote locations like the Oracle of the Dead at Ephyra, where they would perform rituals to commune with spirits by sacrificing valuable bronze vessels and figurines, dropping them into deep, subterranean rivers that were believed to flow directly into Hades. In China, the sacred Mount Tai was considered an axis mundi, a point where heaven and earth met. For over 3,000 years, emperors journeyed there to perform the Feng and Shan sacrifices, the most important rites of their reign. Historical texts hint that they buried unparalleled treasures on its slopes, or in its hidden caves imperial seals of jade, golden tablets inscribed with messages to the celestial gods, and ritual bronzes of immense size and beauty offerings meant to secure the mandate of heaven itself. These were not meant to be recovered, they were meant to be forever absorbed by the sacred mountain. The incredible finds that have been made only hint at what remains hidden. The recovery of artifacts from the sacred cenote was a nightmare of logistics, requiring clumsy early dredging equipment that destroyed as much as it preserved. This leads to the thrilling modern reality. We are only now developing the technology capable of exploring these final frontiers without causing irreparable damage. The water in deep cenotes is often a toxic mix of freshwater and salt water, creating a corrosive hydrogen sulfide layer that hangs like a cloud, obscuring vision and destroying traditional equipment. The caves themselves are a labyrinth of tight, twisting passages, an underwater maze that has claimed the lives of even the most experienced divers. Reaching the potential offering chambers at the very bottom of these systems requires rebreather technology, sophisticated sonar mapping, and a level of technical diving skill that borders on the superhuman. Similarly, the task of scanning the interior of a mountain like Mount Tai without desecrating it presents a monumental challenge. Advanced ground-penetrating radar and muon tomography, a technique that uses cosmic rays to create X-ray-like images of solid rock, are offering the first non-invasive glimpses into potential sealed chambers deep within the rock. But these technologies are in their infancy when applied on such a grand and geologically complex scale. The greatest treasures of the ancient underworld are protected by the most formidable guardians imaginable, crushing pressure, absolute darkness, labyrinthine geology, and the solemn, spiritual weight that makes authorities rightfully cautious about any invasive exploration. What could we potentially find in these pristine, sealed environments? The conditions are often perfect for preservation. An underwater cavern, devoid of light and oxygen, could hold organic materials that would vanish anywhere else in the world. We might discover intact Maya codices, books of bark paper, that could finally allow us to fully decipher their history and cosmology. We could find wooden scepters, feathered headdresses, and textiles, giving color and texture to a civilization we only know from stone ruins. In a dry, sealed mountain tomb, the personal effects of a Chinese emperor, from his lacquered armor to his silken robes, could be waiting, perfectly preserved for millennia. These would be discoveries that wouldn't just add to a museum's collection. They would fundamentally rewrite chapters of human history, giving voice to beliefs and rituals we can currently only guess at. The treasure of the ancient underworld is the ultimate offering, a direct line to the hopes and fears of our ancestors, and it remains locked away in the world's most sacred and dangerous vaults, waiting for the day our technology and our respect for the past are finally worthy of its revelation. From the gilded halls of vanished empires to the sunken holds of doomed ships, the stories of these lost treasures form a breathtaking tapestry of human ambition, faith, and folly. We've journeyed across millennia and continents, from the sacred ark of a desert god to the cursed gold of a Rhineland epic, from the plundered wealth of an Incan emperor to the missing millions of a fallen Tsar. Each tale is a window into the soul of the civilization that created it, a reflection of what they valued most, whether it was divine favor, imperial power, personal glory, or simply the glittering allure of gold itself. This incredible diversity is what makes the hunt so endlessly fascinating. It's not a single mystery but 1,000, each with its own unique fingerprint on history. What is it about these empty vaults and cryptic maps that hold such a powerful grip on our imagination? Perhaps it's the irresistible allure of the unanswered question, the primal thrill of the chase that connects us to every explorer who ever gazed at a blank spot on a map and wondered what lay there. These stories are the ultimate cliffhangers, narratives frozen in time, waiting for a final chapter to be written. They speak to a universal hope that the past isn't entirely lost, that greatness can be found again, and that somewhere out there, a discovery awaits that could fundamentally alter our understanding of who we are and where we came from. It's a potent mix of history, mystery, and the dream of redemption. And now, more than at any other time in human history, we possess the tools to finally write those closing chapters. The dreamer with a worn map and a shovel has been joined by the scientist with a satellite. Modern technology is peeling back the layers of the earth and the sea with breathtaking precision. Satellite imaging and LiDAR lasers are digitally stripping away dense jungle canopy to reveal the ruins of cities lost for 1,000 years. Ground-penetrating radar can sense the ghostly echo of a buried chamber deep beneath the sand without a single spade breaking the surface. In the deep ocean, autonomous submersibles and advanced sonar are mapping shipwreck graveyards with a clarity that would have been pure science fiction just a generation ago. Each technological leap brings us closer to solving these ancient puzzles, not through brute force but through the power of sight, allowing us to look into the earth and across the seabed as never before. The search is evolving from a game of chance into a field of scientific inquiry, but the heart of it remains the same, an insatiable human curiosity. These 30 treasures are just the beginning of a much longer list, a testament to all that we have yet to find and all there is left to learn. The next great discovery could be made by a team of archaeologists analyzing data on a computer screen, or it could be stumbled upon by a farmer plowing his field. That's the magic of this pursuit. You never know where or when the next veil will be lifted. Now we want to hear from you. After this journey through the greatest missing fortunes in history, which one captured your imagination the most? Would you brave the treacherous peaks of the Danganates to find the lost gold of the Inca, or dive into the depths of the Strait of Malacca to board the ghostly wreck of the Flor de la Mar? Would you rather unravel the spiritual mystery of the Ark of the Covenant or solve the bloody heist of the Irish crown jewels? Let us know your pick in the comments below. We're genuinely curious to see which treasure calls to you. And if you enjoyed this expedition into the unknown, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the world's most captivating historical mysteries. The past is still out there, waiting